Issei discovers that in his veins flows the blood of a legendary hero of the youkai race. Can he learn to control his inherited power and the weapon he inherited from his ancestor? Can he live up to the name of his ancestor, and his new uncle who is the strongest youkai alive? Story for adoption. 1. Life 01. Legacy of the Hanyo. Disclaimer. I do not own High School DxD or Inuyasha, or any of its characters, and make no money of this. Issei the Crimson Youkai Chapter 1. Legacy of the Hanyo. Hyodo Issei is your everyday child. Your everyday human child. Born in a modest family with a non-remarkable bloodline. While some people have the blood of great people that marked their names within the pages of history, Issei doesn't. If one would do his family tree, they would all see that most of his ancestors were simple people. Not even a single notable person. Yes, his parents, grandparents and great-grandparents were all simple humans. But what if we could check further? What if we could skip until we reach his ancestors from the Sengoku period, when the land known as Japan was once the playground for the youkai race? If we could track his bloodline during those days, we may in fact learn that Issei may not have only human blood running through his veins. Music. Decorations. Food stands. Costumed people. Yukatas. Carts. The streets of Kyoto was glistering all over with them. After all, today one of Japan's most popular festivals, the Gion Festival, is taking place. The smiling faces of the children could be seen and their cheerful laughs could be heard. Among them was a particularly excited boy. His name was Issei Hyodo. His parents, Yamato Hyodo and Akira Hyodo, loved their only child very much. It was very painful for them to see their child depressed after his best friend Irina Shido moved to England. Their normally cheerful child had become melancholic after their departure. He had stopped smiling all the time, and would spend most of his time in the house. The two parents considered taking some time off from work, spend more time with him and try to cheer him up. The idea that Akira proposed was a change of scenery. They looked up on the calendar and noticed that a festival was held in this period. It was just the thing that Issei needed. His eyes were shining with excitement as they walked through the streets of Kyoto. Be careful not to get lost, Issei. Akira told her son as they walked the crowded streets of Kyoto. I will. He chirped happily as his eyes was drifting on the many decorations on local stores. His father Yamato couldn't help but crack a smile as he saw just happy and excited his son was. It's a while since he smiled like that. Yeah, I was getting worried he won't get over Irina-chan's moving. Akira smiled bitterly. She really liked how her son and Irina got along. She would even image from time to time that the two of them would actually marry when they got older. It can't be helped. She was the only child close to Issei age in the neighborhood, so the two of them were always together. Yamato remarked, truly Irina was a real tomboy, but she was a good kid nonetheless. If only Toji-san didn't have to get a transfer. Akira sighed as she remembered how her neighbor and friend, Toji, got transferred overseas. She could only think it was because the Protestant church wasn't so popular in Japan. That's the way things are. Yamato sighed as he scratched his head. He really liked Toji. Even though he was a pastor, he did share with him some pretty interesting discussion about women's breast. God bless the two men that their wives didn't knew this small detail. I guess. She muttered as she drifted her eyes back to her son, only to notice that he was gone. Where's Issei? She shouted desperately. Huh? Yamato blinked confused as he began looking around. His son was nowhere to be seen. Issei. Wait up, little guy. Issei shouted as he ran after a small fox. I just wanna play. The fox seemed to have started running even faster as it heard the boy's words. As it continued running, it saw a small alley. Noticing how small and shallow it was perfect for the fox to lose trail of the small boy. Oh come on. I'm not gonna hurt you. Issei shouted as he began making his way through the alley, bumping and crashing nearby trash cans. As he reached the corner of the alley, he only found a dead end. Where did he go? He asked himself as he looked around, trying to see if the fox was hiding. He heard the sounds of cans crushing from a nearby pile of garbage sacks. There you are, he shouted as he thought he discovered its hiding place. He began moving the trash cans away, only to find that was nothing there, just a stone wall. He narrowed his eyes, not believing that there is nothing there. He began touching the wall, trying to see if there's some kind of loose brick or something. He kept feeling the wall. Nothing was wrong until he heard a small click. The next thing he knew, the wall in front of him opened and he fell inside it. Wah! He screamed as he kept rolling down on a tunnel. A loud crash sound could be heard as Issei landed on his head. A very visible bump forming on his head. He clenched on his head and pouted in pain. Ouch, ouch. He slowly got up and found himself in another alley, albeit a cleaner one. Where am I? He wondered as he began walking. Wow. He whispered in awe as he saw the street he found his way in. If the streets he was before he started running after the fox was filled with people for the festival, this street was empty, but it looked like he went back in Edo period. There were no longer any modern buildings around, only traditional Japanese buildings. There was also no cement under his feet, only earth. It was like he went back in time. He could only walk slowly as his eyes drifted to the giant palaces and shrines that were in the nearby area. He was mesmerized by the change of scenery that he didn't notice that he bumped into someone. He instantly fell on his bottom. "Oh my! Are you okay, little one?" a very sweet-sounding voice said from his front. Ha! He looked above and was greeted by what was probably the most beautiful woman he even saw in his life. She is a woman in her early 20s, with a very voluptuous figure, long blonde hair and a matching pair of golden eyes. Her attire is one of a shrine maiden. "What's this?" She narrowed her golden orbs at the small boy in front of her. "You're human, aren't you, little one?" she asked with a curious yet sweet voice. She noticed how the boy was simply frozen, staring at her. She gave him a small warm smile to calm the boy. "Oh, don't be scared, I won't hurt you." "No, I'm not scared." He waved his hands in denial. A small blush forming on his face. "It's just, I never met someone so pretty before." She looked at the boy for a few moments, she raised her sleeve and covered her mouth. A small chuckle could be heard from her. My, aren't you a charming one?" She then narrowed her eyes at how his clothes were covered in dust. "Tell me, how did you get here?" "I followed a kitty and then I fell through a tunnel," he answered honestly. "Kitty?" she asked, confused. He nodded his head slightly, his eyes drifting as he saw a familiar-looking animal on a nearby fence. He extended his index and pointed it behind the woman. "Look, there it is." She turned her head towards where Issei pointed. When she saw what it was exactly what he was pointing to, she couldn't help but start laughing. "Is something funny?" he asked, confused. She slowly lowered her body so that she was on the same height as Issei. "Little one. That is not a cat, it's a fox." "Eh?" he shouted in shock. "It's not a cat?" he asked, confused. "But it's fluffy like one and has whiskers." She chuckled lightly. "Well, it is true that there are similarities, but I assure you that as a fox. Is this the first time seeing one?" "Yeah." He nodded, exited. "What is your name, child?" "Issei." "Issei Hyodo. Pleased to meet you, Issei-kun. My name is Yasaka." She greeted him with a gentle smile. She then took a look at the direction he came from. "Tell me, Issei-kun, do you know the way back from where you came from?" He opened his mouth to answer, but realized he didn't even know where he was. "No. That is no good. I can't just let you wander on these streets all alone." She told the small boy. He was lucky that it was her that he met. Other people might not have been as welcoming as her. "But my parents told me never to walk with strangers," he commented. "They taught you good." She nodded proudly, enjoying the fact that the boy is still aware of common sense. "But I'm sure they also taught you never to wander off without them knowing, am I right?" He blinked a few times as he realized what he forgot to do before going on his little fox hunt. "Oh, I didn't tell them where I'm going." "Well, Issei-kun, I have to go and meet an old acquaintance and I can't take you back right now," she told the boy, his face saddening as he heard her. Yasaka couldn't help but get weak against those big puppy dog eyes. She sighed slightly as she considered an alternative. "How about this, I can take you back, but you will have to wait until I finish my meeting." "Okay," he accepted with a big smile on his face. Yasaka took his small hand and the two of them began walking through the streets. Wow! Issei's eyes shined in awe as they laid on the impressive structure in front of him. "Big temple," he said in awe. The building in front of him was so grand and majestic that it made the famous Kiyomizu-dera Temple of Kyoto look a small shrine compared to it. "Impressive, is it not?" Yasaka hummed as the two of them were climbing the stairs of the temple. "Yeah," he nodded, excited. As the two of them reached the summit, Issei could only stare in amazement. The temple looked impressive from the base, but from top it was on a whole different scale. He was so absorbed with the architecture of the building that he failed to see a man approaching. "Yasaka-sama." The two of them turned their head and were greeted by a man dressed in a light blue yukata and a matching bandana. Issei couldn't help but notice his rather pointy ears and his rather sharp canines. "Oh Yasushi, it's been a while." Yasaka greeted the man with a smile. The man bowed respectfully in front of her. "Indeed it has. I apologize, but our lord has yet to arrive, so I would kindly ask for you to wait for him." Yasaka put her hand over her cheek and sighed lightly. "This is rather unfortunate. I promised this child that I will take him to his parents once my meeting is over." "Child?" the man asked, confused, looking around Yusaka. The child next to Yusaka trailer, only to find that Issei was no longer next to her. "Issei-kun? This sure is a cool place," Issei told himself as he strolled around the courtyard of the temple. "Ha!" Issei froze in place as he felt something unusual. It felt like something warm trailed on his back. It was something foreign to him, but it wasn't unpleasant. Like the feeling of someone returning home. What was that? He wondered, confused as he looked around, trying to see if there was something around. His eyes stopped as they saw a nearby shrine. Is it coming from that shrine? He quietly entered the shrine, looking around to see if there was anyone around. He walked down a corridor until he reached a room. He slowly entered the room and was impressed by everything he saw inside. Wow! His eyes drifted on a nearby glass display that held a bright red yukata on a wooden mannequin. Around its neck was a bead necklace. That yukata is shiny red. His eyes then drifted on display in the middle of the room. A sword? He wondered. In the display was a sword, more precisely a traditional Japanese katana. But it looked like it has long surpassed its time of usage. It looked so frail and rusty that a simple swing would be all it would take to break it in pieces. It looks old and rusty, but something feels weird about it. Issei couldn't help but feel a strange feeling of attraction towards it. As if it was calling for him. He slowly extended his hand, his fingers almost gripping the handle of the sword. "What are you doing, brat?" an enraged voice shouted from behind him. "Gah!" Issei shirked in fear. He turned around and saw Yusaka and Yasushi, the latter looking very angry. "How dare desecrate our clan's sacred treasure?" Yasushi asked, furious as he began walking towards Issei. "I didn't mean to," he stuttered as he took a few steps back in fear. Now, Yasushi." Yusaka patted Yasushi on the back, calming the man. "He is but a child, he is simply curious." The man let out a tired sigh, letting his rage vanish. As angry as he was, he couldn't cause a scene in front of an important person like Yusaka. "I understand that, Yusaka-sama. But this is our clan's sacred treasure. Should a scratch appear on it, I will have to pay with my head." She cupped her cheek with her hand, showing a sly smile. "How odd. Judging by the number of scratches on the blade, I'm surprised you still have a head. This isn't a laughing matter. Should my lord find out that let a human child in the shrine, I will have to dust the whole temple with my own tail." He trembled in fear. His master was a rather strict individual after all. "Do not concern yourself. I will make sure that he won't punish you," she told the man. Her gaze then went towards Issei, who was trembling in fear, either by shame for what he did, or by the fear of what will happen to him. "Now Issei-kun. Didn't you promise me that you would behave nicely until I was done?" Issei avoided eye contact with the beautiful lady. He didn't think he was doing something bad. I didn't mean to wander off like that, but, Yusaka asked, curious. "I don't know how to explain it," he admitted honestly, deciding to tell them the truth even though it sounded like lie. "I started having a weird feeling that kept drawing me here." "A weird feeling?" Yasushi narrowed his eyes. "Yeah. And when I entered this room I felt it coming from that old rusty sword," he told as he pointed his finger towards the mentioned weapon. "Hey! That's our clan's sacred treasure," Yasushi protested. He could feel his nails turning into claws due to his indignation. "From the sword you say?" Yusaka narrowed her eyes to the boy. She decided to trust the boy and check on the sword. As her eyes laid on it, she felt her heartbeat stop. For a normal person eyesight nothing was wrong, but for Yusaka it was different. She could see it, the sword was vibrating, as if it was reacting to something. "Impossible," she muttered in disbelief. Yasushi was confused by her reaction. "What is it, Yusaka-sama?" "Yasushi. Perhaps my age has begun affecting my sight. But tell me." She took a moment and looked at the weapon again. "Is the sword reacting to something?" "What?" Yasushi shouted. This should be impossible." Yasushi shouted, almost swallowing his tongue from the shock. "The sword hasn't reacted in over 500 years, since its last owner died." "Is that so?" she wondered as she looked at the sword, then back at Issei. She did remember stories about this weapon, also the fact that ever since this weapon has been brought to this temple, not even the strongest warriors could make it react. She needed to do some test before speculating anything. "Issei-kun, I know this all seems unusual and perhaps scary, but could you please cooperate with us for a few moments?" she gently asked the boy, calming the sense of fear he had. He slowly nodded his head in confirmation. "Good boy." She patted him gently on the head. Now I will ask of you to touch the sword. Do it as gently as you can, she told him as she held the blade in her hands. Oh okay. He nodded as he extended his hands. He gently gripped the handle of the sword, a warm sensation filling his body as he took it. Yasaka could only stare in awe after what she witnessed. Issei may not have felt it, but when he took it his body got covered with energy emanating from the sword. Something that should have been impossible. Tell me Issei-kun, do you feel anything unusual from the blade in your hand? I don't know. Rather than say it feel weird, it actually feels really natural. Like it was made for me, he explained. What in the world is going on? Yasushi wondered in shock. I could understand if the sword would react to a fellow youkai, but a human. Yes, it is most intriguing. The sword shouldn't react to him, unless… Her eyes widening in shock as she thought of the reason why it happened. Unless what? The young Yasushi asked confused. Yasaka was quiet, thinking of what would happen if what she is thinking is right. If she handled this situation right, she might just gain a new ally, but should she handle it wrong, she might just anger the strongest youkai alive. I'm afraid what I am speculating is something I must discuss with your master. The group went to the main hall of the temple. Yasushi had took them to one of the waiting rooms, as per Yasaka's request. Now Issei-kun, I know this might be a bit scary, but I will ask you to be brave. Yasaka told Issei gently, patting his head. Oh okay, he said bashfully, a big blush covering his face. She smiled at him, enjoying his cooperation. Now please wait here, and I mean wait. The man I am about to meet is a very serious person and won't enjoy if you are not here when he calls you. Yasaka was now seating Caesar style on the tatami-covered floor. Her eyes were closed as if she was sleeping. Her ears twitched and she opened her eyes. The next moment the sliding doors opened and a man was revealed. To call this man handsome would have been an insult to his inhuman beauty. He is tall and slender young man, with fair skin with pointy ears, golden eyes with slit pupils, and waist-length white hair with short bangs. On his forehead a purple crescent moon could be seen beneath his bangs, 2 magenta stripes on each cheek, and a magenta stripe on each eyelid. His attire consists of a white kimono with a red and white cherry blossom flower crest at the collar and sleeves. On his left side, 2 katanas with handles of different designs were tied around his waist. The man narrowed his golden eyes on Yasaka sitting from. I apologize for arriving late Yasaka. He apologized with a stoic gaze and a calm voice. Yasaka offered the man a gentle smile as he sat in front of her. It is no problem old friend. As a small side note, I wouldn't have demanded this meeting if you simply attended the periodic meetings of the youkai clan leaders. The man was impassive, his eyes never blinking. You know very well that my clan only attends events that are concerning ourselves. The meetings you held Yasaka are usually gatherings to complain about the mischiefs caused by the different residents of our city. Such are the duties of a leader old friend. You might have knew this if you would have accepted the seat as faction leader in my place many years ago. If I recall correctly, most of our followers wished for you to lead. The beautiful woman commented as she remembered the days when the leader selection was made. If the requirements of leadership were only strength alone I would have been selected as leader without a doubt. But you were more capable in maintaining our city's ley lines and were much more capable in diplomatic matters, he informed his old friend. That is true. Your sense of pride was also a bit of a problem, so you acting as our leader might have led to war. Yasaka commented, a sly smile forming on her lips. I don't deny that. But unlike some other people I lead my clan properly, so my clansmen don't cause any problems, he replied stoic, uninterested by her teasing attempts. A small twitch was visible from her eyebrows. Are you by any chance impaling that my clan is causing problems old friend? He simply looked at her, his face not displaying any emotion other than calmness. None of such. But I do have to admit that the Kitsune clan is rather famous for their tricks and mischiefs. Normally I wouldn't have let that remark slide, but the problem at hand implies me to postpone it. Yasaka commented with a small sigh. If the two of them would have started arguing, there was doubt that they would be doing until tomorrow. I see. Was the subject of the last meeting of such importance? He asked curious. Normally the meetings are anything but entertaining. No, it was just a regular meeting as you called and I simply came to ask of you to attend the next one. Yasaka informed him. Then what has changed? Yasaka took a moment and collected herself. She needed to be very careful how she handled this. Before I will make any accusations that might turn out wrong and enrage you, I must confirm some informations with you. Such as? 1. His eyebrows was raised. It's about your clan's sacred treasure. She told him serious, any air of amusement was gone. What about it? He asked unimpressed. It was not the first time he discussed with her about it. Old friend, you told me tales about that weapon and its former wielder on some occasions during the years we've known each other. She began, remembering the nights they spent in the gardens of the temple sharing tales of their lives before arriving in this city. You told me how that sword was crafted from your father's very own fang and how it was a weapon that could slay 100 enemies with one single swing. You also told me that there were some conditions in order for one to use that weapon, were there not? Yes. He confirmed her question. The sword, while not fully sentient, it does possess a mind of its own and could choose the people who wielded it. From my own personal experiences and knowledge, there are two basic conditions for one to wield it. He took a moment and remember his personal experiences with the said weapon, his left arm throbbing in pain. The first is that the person who wields it must possess youkai, which, unlike chakra that can be used by different races, is available only for those who possess youkai blood. She nodded to herself. She knew that youkai was an energy only available to those who possessed youkai blood. It was for that reason that yujutsu was only available for youkai while senjutsu could be taught to other species. And the second? The second condition is that the user must care for humans. In essence, one who wishes to use its power to protect a human out of friendship or out of love can truly use it. He explained calmly. By those two conditions, a person who holds malice towards humans can never wield it, but also a creature outside of the youkai race cannot wield it. Yasaka nodded. It did make a lot of sense actually. If the weapon was forged from a youkai part for a youkai, it made sense that only youkais could use it. But if that was true, it only raised more question. If those conditions are true, then how is it that the weapon hasn't had a new master in over 500 years? I am not sure myself. He admitted uninterested. Yasaka was lucky she mastered the art of Caesar sitting. Otherwise she might have crashed on the floor out of shock. In theory that weapon can be used by others, but it was a weapon crafted for my half-brother. He closed his eyes. Flashes of the last days the weapon was wielded. The weapon perhaps simply found no one truly worthy of it to wield it. You must agree that among the youkai there are very few who could admit that they truly care for humans. While there may have been many who sought its power, ever since its former owner died no one has been able to awaken it. Years have passed and people have simply stopped trying to claim its power, many believing that sword's power died together with its owner. I see. So you decided to keep it as memento of your brother? Yasaka asked, curious. In all the years she knew him, the man in front of her never really talked about his brother. He was silent for a few moments, contemplating why he did it. Perhaps. I personally never got along with him, but still a half-blood as he was, he became a hero for the Inu youkai, so I simply built him a shrine in his memory. He narrowed his eyes, his meeting Yasaka. But I'm curious, Yasaka. Why is it that you suddenly ask of all of this? Yasaka sighed. She knew that this will displease him, so she decided to stop beating around the bush. I found a child and brought him together with me to this temple. He ventured into the shrine and found the sword. It reacted to him. For the first time since they began their little meeting, no, for a very long time since she knew him, the man reacted. His eyes widened in shock. What? He asked. His voice was cold and dead serious. I know this sounds like a bad joke, but believe me, it isn't. Yasushi can attest my words. Who and where is this boy? He demanded coldly. He is in the next room. But before you demand answers from him, there is one piece of information you must know. What is it? He narrowed his eyes, wondering what else could be more important. He is full human. She stated seriously. Are you trying to anger me, Yasaka? He asked in a calm, cold manner, a powerful aura materializing around him. After what I told you about the sword, you dare to claim that a human managed to make the sword react to him? I knew from the start that this will anger you. She sighed tiredly. But then I remembered something you told me about your brother, more precisely about his children. Where are you getting at? We both know that he was only half youkai. It is common knowledge that half-bloods are persecuted by both humans and fellow youkai. To find a child of a human and a youkai was rare during the period he lived. But, she trailed, her eyes fixed on his. It was even rarer to find the child of a half-blood and a human. You told me that children he had together with a human girl didn't inherited any of his youkai blood. Indeed. As you already know, half-blood have a time during the month where they lose their powers and become the same as humans. Because of this he would turn human during the night of a new month, when the moon wasn't visible. There is a chance that his children were the result of him mating during the moonless nights. From what I saw, neither his children, his grandchildren nor his great-grandchildren inherited his youkai blood, they were full human. Yasaka nodded. It was just as she thought. What about his further descendants? I have never personally concerned myself with his descendants. I didn't have nor the interest or the time. He informed her. His already cold stare became even colder. I'm sure you remember that during that period the biblical faction was slowly finding its way within our homelands. It was one of the darkest periods in our people's history. She nodded, her cheerful face turning into a bitter and sad one. The missionaries led by Francis Xavier who arrived in Kagoshima in 1549 brought more than the words of their so-called God to our lands. When their fellow Christians began following them, they also influenced other races of their biblical faction to seek our lands. The devils and the fallen angels began spreading their influence all around our domains, killing our kind, forcing us to hide as they slowly proclaimed regions of our motherland as their own. She stiffened as she remembered the old and dark days. It wasn't enough that we were already in conflict with the humans, but the Christians brought weapons and gunpowder to them and taught them how to use it against us. She bit her lower lip in frustration as she remembered how many of her friends and clansmen died by their weapons. And the weapons their God created, the sacred gears began manifesting around us, and the humans began using those against us as well. We were forced to go into hiding, seclude ourselves from the world, living in fear that our race might disappear. Those were indeed dark days. It doesn't matter how strong one might be, if one is alone the threat of death will always hunt him. He admitted to himself. Even though he never had any problem fighting enemies alone, he did had to admit that he feared for the safety of his companions. But alas, there was one good event that came out of all of it. Yasaka narrowed her eyes and looked confused at the white-haired man in front of her. What could have possibly be created from the horror and bloodshed that took place? Unification. He stated resolute. Yasaka, I am sure you remember how the youkai were before the biblical faction appeared. He told the woman, making her remember the non-existing youkai society from the Sengoku period. We were scattered, divided. Very few of the youkai clans would actually consider friendship with another clan. Most of the youkai clans were at war with each other, many out of simple rivalry or other petty reasons. Many clans were at war with themselves, unable to unify with their own kind. She continued as she remembered how many youkai chose solitude than fighting as comrades. My own clan was one of those solitary clans. Each individual choosing solitude over acting as a pack, for different reasons. I myself traveled the lands by myself, with only 2 trusted comrades. But it all changed when we were invaded. We simply had to set aside our differences and old grudges in order to survive. Many clan leaders had different visions and desires, but we all could agree that we couldn't let some foreign power strike us down. I'm sure you remember the first clan leaders summit that took place many years ago. How could I forget? She sighed as she grabbed the bridge of her nose. We almost ended up killing each other due to still lingering grudges. Yes. But at the end of the day we have formed an alliance and declared Kyoto as our home capital. While we weren't able to stop the influence and invasion of the Christianity in our country, we able to make sure that we weren't overrun by them. Even though the devils have claimed certain territories in our lands as their own, they only claimed insignificant ones, he stated. While it could be easy to simply attack them and drive out of our homeland, it would only lead even more war and bloodshed with the devils. Should that happen, other factions might benefit from it and get involved, Yasaka noted. It was decided by Amaterasu-sama that we shall leave the devils be. While it may leave a sour taste in our mouths, we don't have a choice but abide. After all, the youkai faction is nothing but an extension of the Shinto pantheon. As long as the gods would not descend from their fields from Takama-ga-hara, we shall not go on full war against the invaders. Besides, the invaders did learn to think twice after they angered Susanoo-sama. Yasaka shivered as she remembered the day when a group of devils desecrated a shrine dedicated to Susanoo and badmouthed him and his wife Kusanadaheim. The devils learned that day that the storm god of the Shinto pantheon was not someone they should anger. Especially if he descended on the battlefield with the Totsuka no Tsurugi in his hands. It took the combined effort Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi to stop their brother from destroying the land himself in his rampage. He nodded his head. He never really considered the Shinto gods of great importance, but after witnessing the power of one of their key leaders he noted to himself not to be disrespectful in front of them. Indeed. But as years passed, and our desire to protect ourselves grew, we youkai learned to accept ourselves despite our differences. I would have never imagined that I will live enough to see children of different clans laughing and playing together. Truly, I would have only thought it was nothing more than fabled dream, she admitted to herself. Memories aside, Yasaka. What do the descendants of my brother have to do with this boy you speak of? He asked, trying to go back on the original topic of the discussion. If you would have honored us with your presence at our meeting, perhaps you would have known. She chuckled lightly, only to get a cold stare from the man. That aside, I may have a theory about why the boy could make the sword react even though he's human. Have you ever heard of the term, atavism? No, he admitted. An atavism is something some may call an evolutionary throwback. The person who it occurs in will experience a reappearing of traits which had disappeared generations before. There has been a similar case recently with a human couple in Kyoto. When the mother gave birth, she discovered that she gave birth a youkai. Which should have been impossible considering that both were human. Blood tests were made and it was confirmed that it was indeed their child. They'd done tests and checked their family trees for any possible youkai ancestor. They discovered that the man had an ancestor who was youkai, but it was 11 generations ago. Some of our doctors speculate that there are many humans that have youkai blood running through their veins, she explained to her old friend. They believe their youkai blood entered a state of dormant in order to preserve itself. They also believe that they could gain their respective youkai powers if they found a way to awaken their blood. If they awaken their blood, the atavism should occur and the person might turn youkai or the very least a half-blood. Give me a moment to see if I understand. He wasn't amused nor angered, he simply stared at her stoically. You believe that the sword reacted to the boy because he has dormant youkai blood in his veins and you believe that he might be able to awaken it and his youkai powers, then in return awaken the sword? She nodded her head. Yes, but there's more to it. I actually believe that the reason the sword truly reacted to him is because it felt familiarity to the boy. I think that the boy might be a descendant of your brother. You do know that the odds of that being true are very thin, don't you not? He asked her. I know this may sound like a childish story, but I want to believe it's true, she told him firmly. He closed his eyes for a few seconds wondering what would happen if it was true. Let's consider it may be true. What would you do then? Why ask him to join our faction, of course, she told him with a smile. Why? He asked, confused. You know very well that if word gets out he might have dormant power. Other forces might try to recruit him. Would you allow the risk of him fighting against us? She told him, her concern was true. Other races such as devils are always on the hunt for potential powerful allies. A sly smile formed on Yasaka's face. Besides, won't your fellow clansmen rejoice if the descendant of their hero would join the youkai faction? He took a moment and thought about it. Even though he is a calm and collected individual, his clan was a rather wild one, so having the descendant of their clan's hero join might actually give them an occupation other than search for fights with other youkai. Besides, it didn't hurt to have more fighters in his ranks. Very well. If this child proves to be who you claim, then I will accept him as a member of my clan. Then it's settled. Yasaka smiled at him and his understanding. Yasushi. Yes, my lord, the young youkai responded. Bring the sword from the shrine. Understood. He nodded as he ran towards the shrine. Yasaka. He narrowed his eyes on the golden-haired lady. I want to meet the boy. Very well. She nodded as she went to a nearby door in the room. Issei-kun, you may come in. The young brown-haired boy walked bashfully in the room. When he saw the man in the middle of it, he wasn't sure if he was a man or a woman. While he was clearly a male, his gentle features made one doubt it for a few moments. Issei sat on a nearby pillow in front of him. The man's eyes locked on him, analyzing his every move. Hello. He greeted a bit shy. He narrowed his eyes on the boy. Truly he was just a human child. Tell me, child, do you know why you're here? He took a moment and wondered what was exactly what he did wrong. Was it the fact that he touched the sword, or the fact he entered the shrine itself? He decided to go with the first. I played with a sword I shouldn't had? Not quite. Yasaka here believed that we might be related. Issei looked at him for a few moments and blinked a few times. Huh? But we don't look alike at all, mister. I don't have long silky white hair, or golden eyes. That's a valid point. He nodded. Truthfully, that was a pretty good reason to doubt him. That aside, I will do a small test. If we are related I shall know. But before that, there is something that you must know. Yasaka here and I are youkai. Issei tilted his head slightly and blinked a few times. Youkai? The man sighed and decided to take a direct approach. Yasaka, if you may. Very well. She nodded, while her friend could show him his own true form. It was rather big for the room they were currently sitting in. The next moment from her back 9 golden foxtails erupted. On her head a matching pair of fox ears appeared. Her pupils were no longer round, instead they were vertical slits. Issei froze as he gazed upon the hidden features of Yasaka. The woman was expecting a reaction like this. Most humans would scream, "Monster," by now. Is my form scary? How cool. Issei shouted with small stars in his eyes as he began running around Yusaka, checking her from every angle. "Fluffy tails," he exclaimed as he grabbed one of her tails and rubbed it on his face. "Kya!" The woman screamed in embarrassment, a huge blush taking over her face. Issei let go of her tail and looked concerned at her. "Did I hurt you?" The woman was frozen for a moment. She placed the sleeve of her yukata over her mouth. Truthfully, the particular tails he grabbed was a really sensitive one. For a kyuubi such as Yusaka to be grabbed by that particular tail was akin to a random man grabbing a woman's bottom. "And no, I was just surprised." She tried to compose herself. "But does the fact that I am a youkai not scare you?" "Why would it?" he asked, confused. "I mean, you never did anything to make me think badly of you." "Such innocence," Yusaka said in awe, not remembering the last time that she met a human who was not truly afraid of her kind. "Or foolishness," the white-haired man commented. He wondered if the boy would have the same answer if he knew what a youkai really was. The doors of the room were opened by a familiar man, carrying an all too familiar sword. "I have brought it, my lord." "Good." He nodded as Yasushi placed the sword on the table in front of him. His eyes drifting on the young Issei. "Child." "Why, yes," he responded nervously. "Unsheathe the sword and hold it," he ordered the young human boy. "Oh, okay." He nodded as he took the sword in his hands. Slowly he began unsheathing the sword from its battered-up sheath. As Issei held the old sword in his hand, the white-haired man could feel it react. Not only that, but one of his own swords he had tied around his waist was reacting as well. Interesting. Now to see if it's true. He took his sword and revealed a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. He extended the blade and let it touch the old sword. The moment the two blades met, a warm and shiny light began covering the two weapons, the light flowing into the two people holding them, their hairs beginning to flow in the air. "Pretty," Issei muttered as he watched the show of light. As the lights danced in the air, he could hear a soft whisper from the blade. "I see." The man nodded as he retracted his sword, the light disappearing the moment he did. A look of nostalgia and understanding forming on his face. He heard the whispers of the two blades, telling him the truth. "So it's true, isn't it, Tenseiga?" he asked his sword as he resheathed it. "Boy." "Why, yes. What is your name?" "Issei Hyodo." He presented himself a bit scared. "Issei. The first generation, a fitting name. It seems that my clan's treasure, the Tessaiga, has recognized you as its new owner and as my brother's descendant." He sit on his knees and looked the boy in his eyes. "I will ask you only this, do you wish to wield this weapon?" Issei was silent for a few moments and looked at the old sword that he called Tessaiga. Truth to be told, he didn't really know what was going on. But the feeling he was getting from the weapon was something that he felt that was missing in his life. "Yes. I don't know why, but I feel like that sword is calling me." "Then I invite you to join my clan," the man told him. "Ha!" He blinked a few times, not understanding what he meant. "It is only natural. As a fellow Inu Yukai, you should live with your own race." Wait. He waved his hands desperately to stop him. "I'm a Yukai?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes. It is the only reason why the Tessaiga reacts to you. Also my own sword. The Tenseiga has confirmed it. There is dormant blood of the Hanyo Inuyasha in your veins," he told him as he got up from his knee. "But I don't have any tails or claws," Issei commented while checking his nails. "You don't. For the moment. If you will join my clan, you will train and learn to awaken your powers." He turned his back on him and walked a few steps, then he changed his gaze back to him. "But that is only if you desire to do so." "I would want that. But I need to ask my parents." "You cannot do such a thing," Yusaka told him. "Why?" "We Yukai are a hidden race. We cannot let our existence get discovered by normal humans. We are already breaking many rules by letting you know all of this," she informed the young boy. "But I live in Kuo. I can't just leave like that," he admitted, though the idea of leaving and moving here didn't sound so bad. "Kuo, you say? That land is under devil jurisdiction. It would be risky to let you live there," Yusaka remarked. "Devils?" he asked, confused. First Yukai, now devils, what's next, angels, he wondered. "We can cover lessons about other races later. Just answer honestly, boy. If you truly wish to wield that weapon and believe you can bear the responsibilities that come with it, I will make arrangements for you and your parents to live in this city," he told the boy. "Now answer, boy." He took a moment and thought about, but rather than think about it, he decided to follow his instinct. "I'll do it. I don't know why, but I feel like it's my fate." He scratched his hair a bit bashful. "That, and I promised a friend that one day I'll become a hero." The man nodded and accepted his resolve. Take him to his parents Yasaka. I have many arrangements to make. I understand. Let's go Issei-kun. Yasaka smiled as she took the boy's hand. Wait. He shouted and looked back on the man. Mister, he called out at him. You never told me your name. He was silent for a few moments. Indeed. Guess it slipped my mind. He straightened his position and looked the boy in the eyes. I am the head of the unified Inu Youkai clan, son of the Inu no Taicho, Toga and the half-brother of the Hanyo, Inuyasha. My name is Sesshomaru. I welcome you the Youkai faction, Issei Hyodo, descendant of Inuyasha. Okay, so that's it. Notes. You know what's a weird thing about High School DxD? The fact that the Shinto pantheon doesn't appear. I mean, come on. The make is Japanese. The story takes place in Japan. Rias is a Japanophile. Akeno is a shrine maiden character, and yet there hasn't been even one single member of the Shinto gods to make an official appearance in the anime or light novels. I mean, WTF people. My only guess would be that they are either dead or completely isolated in their Japanese heaven. I mean, they have devils in their homeland claiming territories like they own it or something. I then thought, what if I could come up with a story that involves the Shinto faction, if not directly at least make them a common topic in the story. I didn't get any proper ideas, so I let it slide for later. Everything changed however when I rewatched some Inuyasha clips. I couldn't help but wonder what could have happened to Sesshomaru and the other Youkai after the story ended. I mean, Youkai have really long lifespans. I mean, freaking Inuyasha was about 150 years old when he met Kikyo and he looked only 15. Then it hit me. What if the world of Inuyasha verse was also the world of the DxD verse? So I thought of creating a story in which Issei is a Youkai and lives a rather different life before the start of the series. I always read in many fanfics when people do background checks on Issei, they always say that he came from a normal bloodline without any remarkable ancestors. Then it hit me, just how far can they actually do background checks? I mean, there must be a limit on how back they can go. So then I thought, what if Issei was descendant of a really remarkable person? So I searched for anime worlds that could exist within the DxD verse, and so I found the Inuyasha verse. I'm surprised that there aren't too many crossovers using these two verses. Now before you wonder, if you think that Issei will be an OP character now that he has the Tessaiga, you are very wrong. Okay, so about the terms I used in this. While I was a dub guy myself, I decided to go with the original Japanese terminologies because if I went with the ones from the dub it might create confusion. Mainly because in the terms demon and devil tend to clash. Words you might not know. Yuki, demonic energy, Inu, dog. Toga, while it's not revealed in the anime or movie, on the wiki it say that Inuyasha's dad was called Toga. That was his name in the third movie script and appeared in one trailer and the original draft of the soundtrack, but the name was scrapped for unknown reasons. Hanyo half demon ch 1 of 3. Next, chapter 2. Life 02. New and Old Faces. Disclaimer. I do not own High School DxD or Inuyasha, or any of its characters, and make no money of this. And a time now some of you have been wondering if Issei still has the boosted gear. Well, to be honest, I'm still considering if he should have it or if someone should have. I think it all depends how strong I will make Issei by the time the canon plot starts. What do you think, should I let him keep it? Now about Issei having a harem. Guys, this a DxD crossover, need I to say more? About who will be part of the harem. I have some pride candidates, but I won't do spoilers, so you will have to read and see who he will choose. Who knows? I might just add some different girls. Chapter 2. New and Old Faces. Come on dear, we don't have all day. Akira told her husband as she carried a box from a nearby truck towards the entrance of the house. Yamato felt something snap in his head at his wife's words. After carrying half of the boxes from the truck, and his wife just a few small ones, he couldn't help but comment. Hey, most of these boxes are filled with your stuff, Akira. The brown-haired housewife puffed her cheeks. Now that's rude. You know we women need more clothes than you men do. Painfully noted. He remarked as he placed the box in the house and stretched his back, a dull pain lingering in it. Yamato couldn't but notice he wasn't in his prime anymore. Less whining and more carrying, dad. Issei smiled as he placed a small box down and dashed back to the truck for another one. I'm starting to feel my age. Yamato sighed. Even thought he was only 32. The fact that he spent most of the day in small office didn't help his physique. I told you we should have hired a moving firm. Akira remarked as she noticed how Yamato was rubbing his back. You know we didn't have time to hire one. He sighed as he took a look to his newly acquired house. It's not my fault everything happened so fast. Akira took a moment and looked around the new neighborhood they live in. I was honestly shocked when you arrived home from work a few days ago and told me that they gave you a transfer here in Kyoto. As if that wasn't shocking enough, they gave you a raise, and even allocated us this nice house." A smug smile formed on Yamato's face, a small spark shining in near his eye. Perhaps the guys from the office finally began noticing my talent. "I doubt that," Akira commented, her answer making Yamato go gray and the sound of something cracking could be heard. "Oh come on Akira-chan." Yamato muttered lifeless, a dark cloud hanging over his head. After about 10 more minutes of sulking and carrying boxes, Yamato realized something. "Though I'm surprised you were so weren't against us moving away." Akira stopped in her tracks and took a few moments before answering. "To be honest, I wasn't too sure what to say. But I noticed how exited Issei was when you told us, so I decided to go along. Perhaps here he will make new friends," she told her husband as she remembered the pure excitement her son was displaying when he heard the word Kyoto. "I see." Yamato nodded, a small smile taking over his smile as he took off his glasses and cleaned them with his shirt. "Well, I hope that our new life in Kyoto will be a good one," he told his wife as he put his glasses back on. "I hope so too, Yamato." Akira smiled gently at him as she looked at her new home. Within the back alley of Kyoto, as the youkai call it, there are many areas and impressive structures, some dating back from the time of the Shinsengumi, while others are just recently constructed. But the most impressive building of them all is the governmental building of the youkai faction. Built after the official unification and proclamation of the youkai faction. It is there that most of the important decisions are made regarding the laws and maintenance of the Kyoto residents. This building also serves as a meeting spot and conference center of the numerous clan leaders of the youkai. While officially Yasaka is the leader of the youkai faction, she doesn't directly control everything herself. An administration was formed by the leaders of the remaining youkai clans in order to properly maintain and control their mixed creature society. Even though they are all youkai in nature, many of them have their own way of life and traditions, so there are times when certain decisions may not coincide with all of them, so the administration exists to make sure that what decision are taken won't cause discord with other clans. Usually at the end of each month the leaders gather in order to discuss this type of problems. But most of the time it turns out into a nagging contest that is a step away from resulting from a full-on brawl between some of the leaders. The meeting this time was an unexpected one requested by Yasaka. Not only did they have a meeting last week, but they weren't even informed why they were called in so suddenly. While some of the people who came seem to be concerned if something bad has happened, some simply don't seem to be really interested. The people in the room are sitting on the wooden floor on small silk pillows. There are 10 people currently in the room. Some of them almost identical to humans in appearance, some displaying small animal characteristics, while some were very far from looking like humans. Su, a man, trailed with a bored expression. He is a man as his mid-20s with blue eyes, black hair tied up into a ponytail and a black goatee. He has a bushy tail swinging on his back and sharp pointy ears. His attire consists of a silver and black armor. "Does anyone have any idea why we are having our meeting so early this time?" "I am not sure, Koga-san." A woman responded. She is a young and beautiful woman with long black hair and pale yellow eyes. She is dressed with a black kimono with a lotus pattern on it. She is a rather tall individual towering around 6 feet, a similarly impressive bust and a small mole under her left eye. Her most prominent feature are 2 horns erupting from her forehead. "Perhaps some of our people went to the devil side again." "HHMMM. Could be Hira Dono," a small green-skinned person remarked. He has large yellow eyes that take up almost half his face. His mouth is similar to a bird's beak, and his ears are pointy. He wears a simple black top, black pants and a small black hat tied on his head. In his hand lies a wooden staff much longer than him. On half of the top of the staff sits the head of an old man, and on the other sits the head of a once beautiful woman. The small man's eyes trailed on a woman on his left. "There was recently the case with those 2 Nekosho from your clan Karara Dono." The woman known as Karara narrowed her eyes on the small youkai. She is beautiful woman in her early 20s dressed with a pink kimono. Her long blonde hair with a few black streaks is tied loosely with a ribbon. Her eyes are red and near them she wears pink eyeshadow. On her forehead she has a black diamond mark. On her head she has 2 black cat ears and on her back she has 2 fluffy cattails. The stare the woman was giving the small youkai was could cut steel. "Jaken. I can't force my clan into submission. I can teach, guide and protect my clan, but I can't stop them from making their choices. If the older sister Kuroka chose to join the devils, it is her choice and she must accept the risks that comes with it." A small frown formed on the little mont's face. Perhaps if you more careful we wouldn't have lost the last 2 members of the Nekoshu race to the devil side. That remark stung Karara. She was already accusing herself of incompetence when she received a report stating that the 2 girls' parents were murdered and that the girls shortly disappeared, only to find out later that the older sister Kuroka chose to join the devil side. But to be told this by someone like Jaken wasn't pleasant. She didn't even notice it, but her claws have extended and appeared ready to slice him. Now, no need to get all worked, Karara. A handsome man in his early 20s tried to calm the feline girl. He has short brown auburn hair, green eyes, and 9 cream-colored, fluffy tails. His attire consists of blue pants, a white shirt patterned with bluish flames. Around his waist he has a small sword tied with a black belt. The handsome fox boy gave the Karara an assuring smile. You are a great clan leader. If that girl chose the devil side, she wasn't worth to be part of your clan. A small smile formed on her lips from her old friend's kind words. Thank you, Shippo. Ha, a man yawned. He is in his mid-30s and is about 7 feet tall. He has fierce-looking black eyes, sharp pointy teeth and long white hair combed back and tied into a wild bushy ponytail. His most notable trait is his candy red skin, and his extremely long nose. His clothes are a pair of white pants and a white, school-style, trench coat with a tall, stiff collar, unbuttoned, revealing his abdomen covered in bandages, a pair wooden sandals on his feet, and a 7-feathered fan tied around his waist. His overall attire screams, leader of a group of delinquents, or more traditionally known as a bancho. I really hope this won't be boring again. He sighed as he rubbed the back of his head. You are not obligated to participate in the meeting, Sojobo, a nearby girl remarked. She is a beautiful woman in her early 20s. She has long black hair tied in a Chinese braid reaching to her thighs, a pair of pointy ears, ruby red eyes, full red lips and light pink eyeshadow. She is wearing a purple Chinese hanfu with a white flower pattern on it. The red Tengu called Sojobo snorted, annoyed. It's not like I have anything better to do besides beating the crap out of those reckless youngsters of my clan. You know that Tengu tend to be restless when they're young, don't you, Soten-chan? Yeah. Soten sighed tiredly, her red eyes drifting in the air. The bar in which my Thunder Youkai and your Wild Bunch brawled last time is still under repairs. I really miss their snakesake. It's not really ladylike to cry over alcohol, Soten. The girl next to her commented. She is a beautiful woman in her early 20s. She has long silver hair reaching all the way to her knees, lightly tanned skin, red lips and a pair of purple eyes. She is dressed in a pure white kimono with a red and pink flower pattern tied with a red sash. Soten narrowed her eyes at her old friend and gave her a bored stare. I will listen to you when you won't get drunk from just 1 cup of sake, Shiori. Sometimes I wonder if all bat yukai are lightweights like you. Shiori could only sigh at her friend's words. It was not her fault that she couldn't handle her alcohol. Besides, Soten had an unusual high resistance towards alcohol. From the other side of the room, Koga's ears twitched when he heard the words, sake, and, drunk. Hey Soten, give me a call when they repair that place. I haven't went drinking in ages. Soten nodded her head at the wolf yukai. From her side, the fox yukai Shippo couldn't help but have a Cheshire cat smile. Did Ayame-san finally let you out of your leash, Koga-san? The sound of something snapping resonated in the room. What was that, brat? Koga asked with a very unpleased face. Nothing at all. Shippo shrugged his shoulders, trying to seem innocent. Sojobo couldn't help but chuckle at this scene, an amused smile forming on his face. He isn't too far away from truth, wolf brat. You looking for a fight too, Tengu bastard? Koga barked at the Tengu elder, his rage 1 step away from making him jump and start a fight. Who? Sojobo trailed as he got up from his seat and cracked his knuckles. I could use some warm-up. Everyone please. There is no reason for us to argue. A man tried to call the other two. To call this man tall was an understatement. He stands 9 feet tall with a large and thick body covered in many scars. He has huge bulging blue eyes and a black hair tied samurai style. His attire consists of a simply blue yukata, without any sleeves. You call this arguing? Koga remarked, bored, all his feelings of rage evaporating from the giant man's stupid remark. We are lucky that not all clan leaders have gathered, otherwise I think this room would need redecorating afterwards. Still a softie as always, Jinenji. Sometimes I wonder how you lead the Mix clan. Sojobo commented as he looked the man's impressive stature. He simply couldn't understood how someone like him could be so gentle and pacifist. With compassion and understanding. Something you seem to lack, Sojobo-san. An amused voice said from the entrance of the room. getting the attention of everyone in the room. It was none other than the official leader of the youkai race. "Yasaka. About time you arrived," Sojobo commented with a tisk as he sat back on his pillow. "I apologize, but I had some preparations to make." Yasaka smiled at the people present as she walked to her seat in the other side of the room. During her small walk she couldn't help but notice that not all leaders were present. But the fact that 10 of them actually managed to come wasn't too bad. She took her seat and greeted the people present with a smile. "I would like to thank you for arriving on such a short notice. Shall we call everyone present?" Shippo let out a tired sigh as he heard the beautiful woman's suggestion. "Do we really have to do it every time, Yasaka-ne?" "Now Shippo-chan, it's proper custom for participants to present themselves," she gently told the fox youkai, a small yet intimidating smile forming on her face. He shivered as he saw that smile. He knew from past experiences what that smile meant and he wasn't going to see what it means again. "Fine. Leader of the fox youkai, Shippo." Leader of the Nekomata youkai, Karara. The feline woman presented herself. Priestess of the Oni youkai, Hira. She bowed slightly, displaying soft elegance. Thunder youkai leader, Soten. She presented herself with a small sigh, not enjoying that she must do this every time they have a meeting. It wasn't like they didn't know each other. Maiden of the bat youkai, Shiori. The silvered-haired beauty presented herself. Daimyo of the kappa youkai, Jaken. The green little youkai nodded his head. Pack leader of the wolf youkai, Koga. The wolf youkai replied in an annoyed tone. Boss of the Tengu youkai, Sojobo. The red man presented himself in a bored manner. Chief of the mix youkai, Jinenji. The giant bowed respectfully. "I thank you all again for arriving on such a small notice. It is a shame though that not everyone is present," Yasaka remarked as she looked at her fellow youkai. "Did something happen, Yasaka-sama?" Shiori asked with a concerned voice. The blonde woman waved her head in disagreement. "I assure you that nothing bad has happened. This meeting was in fact requested by one of your fellow clan leaders." Jaken rumbled in annoyance. "Who has the nerve to call upon us instead of waiting for the next meeting?" "That would be me, Jaken," a strong voice said from the door. At this everyone present turned their heads to see who it was. Some of them were surprised to see who it was, while others smirked in excitement. Jaken however froze and all of the color in his skin has drained as his mouth hang open. "SSSS Sesshomaru-sama," he muttered in fear, cursing his mouth from opening and commenting like that. "Well, if it isn't Toga's cub." Sojobo smirked as he saw the son of his old friend and rival. Jaken quickly ran in front of the handsome Inu youkai and bowed down to him. "Apologies my lord. I didn't know this meeting was your request. Guess someone is still an ass-kisser," Shippo remarked as he saw a very nostalgic scene. His only dissatisfaction was that Sesshomaru didn't smack him on the head like in the old days. "So you called this meeting, huh? If I knew I wouldn't have bothered coming," Koga remarked with a bored expression as he supported his head on his left hand. "The reason why I called this meeting might interest you, Koga." The white-haired man commented, uninterested by the wolf yukai's reaction. "I'm listening," Koga said, his interest suddenly growing. Sesshomaru took a moment and thought about the best way to explain the event that he was part of a few days ago. He could use the slow approach and explain everything from the beginning, or he could just give them a brief and simple explanation. He chose the latter. "A few days ago we have discovered one of Inuyasha's descendants." That was rather direct. Yasaka sighed at her friend. "I believe in direct approach," Sesshomaru thought to himself as he took a look at the present people's reaction. They weren't shocked or surprised, they simply stared at him. "That's it?" Koga asked while his face was what many would call an "are you serious?" face. Sojobo was just as unimpressed and was simply picking his ear with his pinky finger. "No offense kid, but I think that there are many people in our country who are his descendants. I should have let you handle this, Yasaka," Sesshomaru remarked, regretting not letting Yasaka explain the situation when she suggested it. "I did warn you." Yasaka smiled, amused at her friend's reaction. Hira couldn't help but wonder. From what she knew, the Hanyo Inuyasha had a number of children with the priestess Kagome. By now their descendants are probably spreader throughout all of Japan. So to her the only logical explanation is that this descendant that Sesshomaru spoke of must have some sort of extraordinary ability or power to get his attention. What makes him so special? He made Tessaiga react to him, he answered simply. Everyone present was affected one way or another by this announcement. Shippo for one was drinking some tea and chalked on it when he heard, "Bah." "He what?" Sojobo asked in shock and excitement. As one of Sesshomaru's father's oldest rivals, he had the chance to personally witness the power of the sword. As shocking and unbelievable this may sound, Tenseiga has confirmed it. The child is a human, who possessed the blood of Inuyasha and was able to make Tesseiga react to him. Sesshomaru elaborated, gaining. I thought that Rusty's sword was gone for good. Koga commented, never expecting that sword to be used at anything besides being an exposition item. So did I. Soten nodded, a bit impressed. But it seems that it has found someone who has the potential to awaken its true form. That brings us to the reason of why I called this meeting, Sesshomaru said as he took his seat. While he may possess the blood of Inuyasha, it's still dormant. So in order for him to use Tesseiga, he must first awaken his youkai blood and powers. However, for that to happen, he will require proper guidance and training in the arts of youkai. He narrowed his eyes at the people who were staring confused at him. That is why I want to ask if there are any among you who wish to train him. Everyone present were wondering who this guy was and what he did with the real Sesshomaru. The silent and prideful man would never ask for help this way, it simply wasn't his style. This, however, showed the people present how important this situation is for him to ask for help. This is rather unexpected. Shippo commented as he rubbed his face, which he asked Soten to pinch to see if was dreaming. Pain was there, this was real. I mean, you never ask for help, why aren't you training him yourself? The boy needs basic training in most domains in which most of you are unmatched. Besides physical and yuki control, he needs to be educated about our history and traditions. Human or not, he needs to know about the true world he lives in. The white-haired man trailed. If the boy must learn things that we have learnt naturally, he should do it from the best. I can understand that, but what is stopping you from doing it? Shippo asked, a bit paranoid. If he wanted the boy trained, he could have done it himself instead of asking for others. I don't know what to train. I can't teach him how to fight or use techniques of Inu Yukai until he becomes one himself. Also, I believe that if I would teach him the way of the sword the way he is right now, I might accidentally kill him. Sesshomaru stated seriously while holding his chin with his hand. Shippo and many others opened their mouths to comment at him, but no words came out and they were simply stayed silent. Okay. I honestly can see that happen. The fox Yukai commented. A small vein could be seen throbbing in Jaken's forehead in response to the fox boy's words. Hey, don't insult Sesshomaru-sama. He simply isn't used to teaching others. As you may know, he never took a student before. Maybe it's because he scares most people with his stares. Koga commented with a smug smile. Such insolence. Jaken hissed at the wolf Yukai. Everyone. I would kindly ask you to behave. Yasaka said with a smile. One so sweet, yet the tone of her voice sent shivers down the spines of many of the present leaders. Why yes, Yasaka-sama. Jaken nodded quietly as he took back his seat. Sojobo was calm and simply stared at the white-haired Yukai. In all the years he knew him, he never once saw him exhibit such interest in someone. It was a curious sight. Well, not that I'm not interested about this kid Sesshomaru, but why are you giving him so much importance? He narrowed his eyes on the Tengu leader and stared at him for a few seconds before stating simply, Instinct. Instinct? Sojobo asked with a raised eyebrow. He nodded his head slightly. Yes, I do not know the exact reason why, but my instinct tells me that this boy will be a great addition to our faction. Also, Tenseiga feels the same. The red-skinned man stared at him for a few moments until a smile cracked on his face. Boo-ha-ha-ha-ha. The Tengu exploded in a hysteric laughter. His laugh was so powerful that the room he was in began shaking as if an earthquake was taking place. The serious cub is trusting his instincts. He asked between chuckles. Now I've seen them all. You know what I'm in. All of the leaders present, minus Sesshomaru, just dropped their jaws. What? For them to see Sojobo, who is known to be a rather laid-back person who doesn't really give a damn about most things, was really shocking. I don't know what's the full story of this kid, but something tells me things will get really fun. The man smirked, exited as if he just found a new source of entertainment. How about it? Will you leave his physical training to this old man? Sesshomaru considered his offer. Among all of the leaders, Sojobo was the strongest when it comes to pure physical strength and hand-to-hand combat. But from what he heard, his training methods seemed to be a little extreme. But then again, the ones that manage to take on his training will turn out great warriors. He was the one who trained Minamoto no Yoshitsune after all. Try not to kill him, Sojobo. He told the Tengu, he just found someone to inherit Tesseiga, and he wasn't going to lose him on the first weeks. From the other side of the room, Shippo couldn't help but get fired up as well. I'm in as well. If it's about Yujutsu, I'm your fox. Plus I'm curious to see if he's anything like Inuyasha. Then you can leave senjutsu to me. Karara nodded a bit, exited as well. You said he needs to be taught about our history, right? Hira asked to confirm, getting a nod from the white-haired Inu youkai. I think I could do that. Koga on the other hand let out a small sigh. I don't think I have anything I can teach the Mutt's descendant, but I could spar with him from time to time. Me too. I'm not really teacher material, but I think I can teach him how to dodge, Soten remarked. Shiori raised her hand a bit bashful. I think I could teach him about barriers. If I can't teach him how to properly use them, I could at least teach him how to disable enemy ones. Jinenji decided to throw in his own offer. I could teach him about herbs and medicine if he wishes. Jaken decided to also take the stage, not enjoying the fact that the others were getting on Sesshomaru's good side when that was supposed to be his job. If Sesshomaru-sama orders me, I could teach him about proper etiquette so he won't end up a barbarian like Inuyasha. The person who was most astonished by the way things have progressed was none other than Yasaka. It was something really rare to see her friends actually agree on something without having to complain or fight about it. Oh my. I would have been surprised if 3 would have volunteered to train him, but never all 10 of you. Be glad not everyone is present at the meeting. Otherwise he might have gotten to many teachers. Karara chuckled. Truthfully, having 10 people to teach him was already a bit extreme. If the others would have joined to teach him, the boy might just broke from it. So when are we gonna meet the brat? Koga asked, wondering if he will be anything like his old rival. Soon. Sesshomaru stated stoic. He just moved today to Kyoto. We will let him first accommodate, then we can start his training. Yasaka decided to share her own opinion about how the training should go. My advice is that you don't become hasty. While he may possess the blood of Inuyasha, he is still human. Until he awakens his power, he should only receive physical training and be taught only basic lessons about youkai powers. It will serve no purpose to overwork him when it won't help him. I will start my own training with him when he awakens his powers. Until then he will be under your care. Sesshomaru stated simply. If this matter has been solved, I will take my leave. Sesshomaru. Yasaka called him with a sweet yet deadly voice, a dark aura surrounding her. Why the hurry? After all, you haven't taken part in any meetings during this year, so why don't you take a seat and inform us of your clan's latest activities? The white-haired man could only nod slightly and take back his seat. He didn't understand why, but the way Yasaka spoke made him become more reluctant. Such are the powers of a woman's charisma. A few days have passed and Yasaka went to solve her next problem. She was now in her human form, in front of the new Hyodo residence and pressed the buzzer at the door. She waited a few moments and Akira opened the door and greeted her with a smile. Oh, hello Yasaka-san. While she didn't know the blonde woman too well, she did gain a sense of trust in her when she helped Issei find them when he got lost. That and a small hypnotic spell to make her and her husband to trust her like a family member. So it wasn't a problem for her to just drop by and take Issei somewhere. Good evening Akira-san. She greeted the housewife with a smile. Hi Yasaka-ne. Issei greeted the fox lady as he dashed outside, looking all excited. Akira sighed after seeing her sons jumping around, hoping he won't give Yasaka too many troubles. I'm sorry that my son made you come all the way here. No, it's okay. I did promise him I would show the temple I work at. She waved her hand in denial, her gaze then changing at the small excited boy. Are you ready Issei-kun? Yep. He exclaimed enthusiastic as he began walking with Yasaka. Make sure you won't give Yasaka-san any trouble Issei. Akira shouted to her son. I won't mom. He nodded as he left together with Yasaka. A few minutes after the two of them started walking, Yasaka decided to start a small conversation. Are you nervous? His smile dropped and a rather embarrassed look took its place. A bit. The man who said I was related to his brother is a bit scary. She let out a small chuckle. Foo. I know he has a rather intimidating presence, but he isn't a bad person. Who is he anyway? He said his brother was my ancestor or something. He asked with a confused stare. Even though he was given some basic informations, he was never given a proper head-to-toe explanation. Why yes. You see Issei-kun, the man Sesshomaru spoke of was his half-brother Inuyasha. He lived during the Sengoku period, and became a hero of the youkai race. You Issei-kun are his descendant. Issei was in awe. So his was basically related to a real hero, something that only happens in movies and books. Realization then came when he remembered meeting Sesshomaru. Wait. Wasn't the Sengoku period 500 years ago? It was. Why do you ask? Yasaka asked, a bit curious. Then how is he still alive? Issei asked, confused. wondering how Sesshomaru was still alive, let alone looking so young. Youkai have a much longer lifespan than humans do. I think that Sesshomaru is about 1,000 years old, she explained casually. 1,000? He jumped back in shock, but he looks so young. The blonde woman chuckled at his reaction. Many of us do. There are many creatures that can manipulate the way they age or their physical appearance. I myself manipulate the way I look. You too? He asked, curious as he looked at her from head to toe. How old are you then? Issei-kun. She started, a dark aura forming around her smiling face. It's not nice to ask a lady her age. Oh okay. He nodded in fear, wondering if Yusaka was always this scary. The two of them continued their walk for a few more minutes before Issei asked. Say Yusaka-ne. What is it? Why is it important for me to awaken the Tessaiga? How should I explain this to you? She tiled her head slightly and tapped her cheek with her index finger, a small idea flashing through her head. Tell me, have you heard of Musashi Miyamoto? Yeah. The small boy nodded. One would have had to live under a rock to be Japanese and not know of the founder of the two-sword style. Now tell me, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of him? The Niton Ryu style? He said, a bit uncertain. She clapped her hand and smiled to him. Exactly. If a person would fight him, he would be careful of his style of fighting. In some cases, many opponents would choose not to fight due to the advantage the style gives him. She elaborated in a simple way so a child such as Issei could understand. The case is similar with the Tessaiga. That sword has a hidden ability that would cause enemies to tremble in fear by only knowing it exists. While we aren't a weak force, it would be in our best interest to avoid conflicts and war. If word gets out that someone was able to awaken the Tessaiga, it will cause our enemies to think twice before trying anything against us. She explained to young boy, omitting the small detail that he will have to fight if a war ever started. So basically, if I awaken it, the yukai's enemies will be scared to fight us, he slightly deduced. Something like that. She nodded. Yusaka stopped walking as the two of them were in the courtyard of a local temple. In front of them was a giant old tree encircled with a rope with white pieces of paper, a sign that the tree was under protection and cannot be harmed. Now Issei-kun, look carefully. This is one of the back entrances to the yukai side of Kyoto. She pointed at the tree. Extend your hand, Issei-kun, she asked the boy. Okay. The boy nodded and gave her his hand. On her index finger a small bluish flame appeared. She then used that finger to carve the kanji for ki in his palm. To his surprise, it just tickled him and not burned him. After she was done, he stared at his hand in confusion as the symbol disappeared, but curiously he could still feel it there. This will serve a key. Last time you entered by mistake in the yukai area, but now you can enter and leave whenever you want. She explained to the young boy, clearing his curiosity about how he ended up in the yukai area last time. Try tapping the tree with that hand. He nodded and touched the tree. The next moment a bright light blinded him. When it faded away, he found himself in the middle of a street. Wow! The boy muttered in awe as he saw the people around him. Everywhere he looked there were yukai. Some looked like they were human with animal-like characteristics. Others like animals with human characteristics. Others like creatures from fantasy books. Other looking like literal monsters. So many yukai. Foo, interesting isn't it? She chuckled as they began walking, many of the people passing by stopping to bow respectfully to Yusaka. Yeah, but how come there weren't any of them last time I was here? He asked. The last time he was on these streets there wasn't anyone, it looked like an abandoned town. Oh, that's simple. When festivals are held in Kyoto, most of us yukai transform and participate in them, helping with stands and shops or simply going there to have fun, she explained. Sounds fun. He commented as the two of them were climbing the stairs of the Inu Yukai temple, not bothering to look up at the entrance of the temple. I see you are giving the boy some lessons, Yusaka. Sesshomaru commented from the temple's gate. Issei froze and looked at the man. He wasn't used to his powerful presence. Yusaka patted him on the shoulder and gave him a gentle smile, calming him in the process. Oh my! How nice of you to come and greet us, Sesshomaru, Yusaka remarked. It's only proper manners, he commented, uninterested. As serious as always. Yusaka sighed. The snow-haired man decided to ignore the woman's remark and focus as his apparent relative. Did you learn the back entrance Yusaka showed you? Yeah. Issei nodded, a bit bashful. Good. Sesshomaru remarked and began walking towards the courtyard of the temple. The two of them followed him. When they arrived, stopped in middle of a traditional Japanese garden where Sesshomaru took seat on a pillow in the grass. They follow suit and sat next to him on nearby pillows. What are we waiting for? Issei asked, curious. An old acquaintance of mine will arrive shortly, Sesshomaru stated with his eyes closed. About half an hour has passed and Issei was on the verge on jumping from his seat and just take a few laps around the temple. I'm so bored. Just how long have we been waiting? He asked himself as he stared at Sesshomaru, who hasn't moved an inch since he took his seat. Even now his eyes are closed. He sure doesn't talk a lot. Say uncle. Issei began, only to get sharp stare from Sesshomaru. He didn't seem to enjoy being called that, especially since Yusaka was chuckling so much from it. Uncle? He asked with a raised eyebrow, wondering why Issei called him that. Didn't you say that your brother was my ancestor? Doesn't that make you my great uncle or something? Theoretically yes, but I would advise you to call me by name, he informed the young boy, his face being only stoic. I can't, Issei said with a serious expression. Why? Your name is kinda hard to pronounce, he told him with an embarrassed face. He looked at the boy for a few moments, even though his face wasn't showing he was outright confused. I don't see why. Just try saying, Sesshomaru. Sesshomaru? Sesshomaru, Sesshimaru? Sesshomaru. Sesshomaru. His left eye began twitching hard at Issei's inability to say his name. That and Yusaka was chuckling with way too much satisfaction for his own taste. Fine, I will make an exception and allow me to call me uncle until you can learn to pronounce my name, he told him with a sigh. What was it that you wanted to ask me? Well, I was wonder. His sentence was cut short when a bolt of lightning hit the ground in front of them. The force of it was quite strong that it made Issei crash behind Sesshomaru. From the place the lightning hit, a huge smoke cloud was formed. Sorry I'm late, a voice said from within the cloud. As the smoke cleared, two figures could be seen. The first one was a rather large brown cow with 3 huge eyes. The second was a scrawny old man casually sitting on the back of the cow. Surprisingly, his eyes were just as large as the cow's. Sesshomaru got up from his seat and walked towards the old man. You are late, Totose. The old man wasn't bothered at all by his cold stare and simply chose to complain. You were the one who requested me to give Tessaiga a maintenance, so excuse me if it took a little longer. I hope this wasn't too troubling, Totose Dono. The foxwoman greeted the ancient blacksmith. Rather than troubling, I simply can't understand the requests people make these days. Everybody asks for their weapons to be easy to conceal or have an obscure form or transform into a harmless-looking item. The old man sighed as he remembered how every client he has asks for the same things. What happened to the good old days when people would carry their weapons proudly in public and display their beauty? Sesshomaru as always didn't care what the old man told him. Have you been able to modify Tessaiga the way I asked, Totose? The old man sighed and put the mentioned sword in front of Sesshomaru. Yeah, I did. Now the sword is able to change to a small pendant and its powers won't be detected. The man nodded as he stared at the sword. Good. The boy will need to hold on it all the time and it would strike unwanted attention from humans if they saw him carrying a sword. Now that you mentioned it, where is the kid? Totose asked, a bit curious. He was working on a new sword when he found out, and due to the shock the hand in which he had a hammer slipped and he accidentally hit his other hand. Sesshomaru was curious why he was asking where Issei was. He looked around and he wasn't there. Then he looked to where Yusaka was pointing. Issei was by a nearby wall, passed out on the ground, and his eyes were spinning in circles. It would seem that your entrance had too much impact on him, Yusaka commented as she picked up the passed out boy. Sesshomaru could only sigh, his instincts telling him that this boy will be harder to train and raise than he had initially imagined. Sesshomaru was tired. He didn't expect this day to be so long and mentally exhausting. But alas, such are the days of a leader of a youkai clan. He slowly walked through the halls of the Inu Youkai temple, his eyes drifting sometimes on the servants he met along the way, all respectfully bowing to him. His walk reached an end when he arrived in front of his personal quarters. He slowly opened the door as gently as he could, not making any noise. His eyes drifted towards the bed where a person was sleeping. He sighed as he made his way to the bed, placing his 2 swords on a nearby sword support. Stripping of his white kimono and taking a seat on the edge of the bed, the moonlight that shined through the window illuminating his alluring naked form. Sesshomaru stared at the floor in contemplation, a feeling of concern drifting through his body. His train of thought was interrupted when he felt a pair of soft hands trailing his bare chest. Are you back, dear? A gently voice asked. I'm sorry, I woke you up, he told the girl as he held one of her hands against his cheek. He turned around and looked at her. Even after so many years in which he has known her, he is still captivated by her beauty. She is the embodiment of a traditional Japanese beauty. A beautiful woman in her mid-20s with fair skin, bright brown eyes, and long, dark, silky hair. She rubbed one on her eyes with her free hand, letting out a small yawn. "It's okay. You know I can't really sleep without you." "Of course." He nodded as he remembered the previous times he was gone. He slowly found his way under the blanket and placed his hands under his head, his eyes staring at the ceiling. The girl snuggled her way and placed her head over the man's chest. "Did the meeting go well?" she asked gently. "Better than I expected. The boy will be under the care of 10 of the clan leaders," he stated simply as he stared at the ceiling. "That's great news," she chirped happily. She had been very excited when she heard that he found a descendant of Inuyasha. "I suppose," he muttered, his eyes still drifting in the air. She noticed the way his eyes looked and understood that something was on his mind. "Is something wrong? Shouldn't you be pleased?" "I am, but," he trailed, trying to find the proper words to explain this feeling that he is experiencing. She put her small hand over his cheek and guided his face towards hers. Their eyes fixed on each other, her stare soft and warm. "Tell me what bothers you, my love." He took a moment before sighing. Among the very few weaknesses that he had, one of them was defiantly her stare. "I believe that once the boy awakens Tessaiga, something vile might happen." She tilted her head, confused at her lover's words. "Why would you believe that?" "When Tessaiga was forged, a war started within our country. A war which my father had to stop by using it." He explained as he remembered the first time that his father had demonstrated the power of Tessaiga. "The second time was when it awakened to help Inuyasha to stop me from killing him and his friends. Then there was the incident with Naraku." There was silence in the room. It might just be his paranoia, but his words did hold some truth. But she couldn't let something like this affect her loved one. She got closer to him and placed her forehead over his own. "Don't worry. No matter what happens, the boy has you, the strongest living youkai, on his side, and now he has the youkai faction to protect him." "I suppose you are right." He smiled gently, a smile he shows only to the one person who managed to capture his heart. The heart he never thought that he had. The heart he would have never imagined he would offer to a human. "Thank you, Rin. What are wives for?" She smiled brightly at her husband. "Mmhhh." She didn't get say anything else as Sesshomaru pressed his lips against hers. She was a bit stunned at first. This wasn't their first kiss, but she was surprised by his initiative. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the softness of his hair that was brushing against her face, his tight and passionate embrace, his sharp nails trailing on her back gently without hurting her. The kiss lasted for a minute or so before he broke it. Rin's face was bright red, her breath was heavy and panting. She couldn't help but chuckled between her huffs. "I guess I won't be getting any sleep after all." Sesshomaru shifted his body and whispered to her ear in a seductive tone. "We both won't." So this was chapter 2. This chapter, as you can't guess, wasn't focused on Issei but on other characters. Now onto some business. I considered that if this is a crossover with Inuyasha, I can't make Sesshomaru be the only one to make a canon appearance. So if I made good old Grumpy Dog a clan leader, why not make some of the other characters as well? The more characters from Inuyasha that appear, the more this will seem like a crossover. Now about the leaders. I am sure you are wondering, WTF? Well, I will give you some brief explications here. The complete ones will be later in the story. Kurara human form. Because Kurara is a Nekomata in the Inuyasha verse and the Nekomata in the DxD verse are like Kaneko and Kuroko, I decided to add a twist. Kurara has learned Senjutsu and Yujutsu and she is able to manipulate her form. Her human fur is almost identical to that of Sango, albeit her hair is blonde plus the small cat features. Jaken a leader. Before you go and tell me, how the hell is Jaken a leader like Sesshomaru? Let me say this. Jaken used to be a ruler of a Kappa tribe before he joined Sesshomaru, so that gave me the idea that even though he is a weakling, he must have some proper leadership and tactic skills. That and the fact that his overall attire is similar to a daimyo gave me the idea that he might be a good leader for his fellow Kappa Yukai. Shippo having 9 tails. I have noticed that there are a lot of stories that depict fox yukai having a certain number of tails, ranging between 1 and 9. So I thought of this. There are 2 types of kyubi yukai. The natural born like Yasaka or Kuno, and the achieved ones. Unlike normal kyubi who are born with 9 tails, achieved kyubi are fox yukai who have spent their lives training and gained additional tails as they progressed and got stronger. Koga. Happily married with a yame and a family man. Didn't really change physically too much except he now has a goatee. Soten. Some of you may know her, say not. I thought she may turn out in quite the looker once she grew up, so why not make her into a hot leader, and give Shippo a rough time? Shiori. While not a memorable character, I think she could be good for the story. Plus I have a weakness for long silver hair. She may be a Hanyo like Inuyasha, but her barrier powers were considered to be very strong. Jinenji. While he may not have the personality of a leader, he knows firsthand what it means to be marginalized because of appearance and race. The Mix clan he leads is a clan formed of the remains of other Youkai races, which had far too little members left to recreate their clans and were in danger of being marginalized by other races. Hira, OC, okay. How can I speak about Youkai without mentioning Onas? But considering that there wasn't any notable Oni character in neither Inuyasha nor DxD, I decided to create my own. You probably wondering why I didn't make a male Oni. Well, I blame a certain artist for creating Mo Oni girls. Don't judge, they're really cute. Sojobo, OC, based upon the recorded Sojobo in Japanese folklore, the Dai Tengu that was said to have trained Minamoto no Yorimitsu. The FGO fans know who I'm talking about. His overall look and personality is based on a delinquent. I took a lot of inspiration from Tengu Brunch from Toriko, don't know why, but I really like his character. Totose still alive and kicking. Still forging weapons for Youkai, but he can't get used to the whole modernization of the world. Sesshomaru's behavior in the end of the chapter. Well, I know that didn't really sound like something he would say, but hey, the guy has been married for a while, and I believe that Rin was able to melt some of the ice he had around him. Why I didn't make an exact number on clan leaders? Well, I might get some ideas for more clans later, so I left it uncertain. About Jaken talking about Kuroka and Sharon. Perhaps I don't remember too well, but I don't think it was specified at which age did Kuroka join the Devil's side. That, and I don't think it's specified at all how long she was in the Devil Peerage before she killed her master. So I decided use that information in my advantage. About why Rin is still alive. Well, let's just say that something happened to her and she stopped aging. Now she is Sesshomaru's wife. Question. Is there by any chance any shogi player among my readers, or is there anyone who knows how shogi functions and the rules, etc.? Oh well, see you guys next time. Don't forget to review. No, seriously, review. It helps me get pumped up and work on the next chapter. Previous CH2 of 3 next 3. Life 03. The training begins. Disclaimer. I do not own High School DxD or Inuyasha, or any of its characters, and make no money of this. Praise the sun. I finally managed to post something. Man's summer vacation is gone. And by vacation I mean my summer job. And university is starting in a week. Damn. So much I could have written this summer if I wasn't busy. Oh well, no use crying over spilled milk, as some say. Q and a time after some thinking, debating and reading some opinion my watchers wrote me. I've decided for Issei to keep Diedrich. Now about when he will awaken him. HHMMM, I think I have a nice idea. Normal speech Diedrich thoughts Diedrich * voices of sacred gears, Diedrich. * voices of special creatures and events, Diedrich. Chapter 3. The training beings. Issei was bored. Tomorrow he will officially begin his so-called training sessions, under the tutelage of some of the strongest Youkai of Kyoto. Normally he would be excited, but a question went through his mind. What exactly will this training be? That was the thought that has been bugging him for a while. He was sitting on the couch and was going through different channels on the television. He sighed as there was nothing interesting to watch, and his eyes drifted at his right wrist. More exactly at the small bracelet that he was wearing on it. It had a chain made out of silver and a miniature sword attached onto it. Wonder how long it will be before I can use it. He wondered as he stared at his small accessory, remembering how he obtained it. They're all better, Yusaka said as she finished applying a rather large band-aid on Issei's head. I would advise you not to pamper the boy, Yusaka. Sesshomaru remarked. It would be rather annoying if the boy developed a habit of crying from small wounds, or at least it would be annoying for him. I am just tending his wound, the fox lady commented, giving Issei a pat on the head. So he's Inuyasha's descendant? The old man narrowed his huge eyes at the boy. Yes, Totose Dono, this is Issei Hyodo. Yusaka confirmed his curiosity. He stared at Issei for a few moments, blinking fast. At first sight he doesn't look like Inuyasha at all, but if I look closer to his face, there is a small resemblance. He nodded to himself, only to make Issei a bit confused, wondering if he really looked like his ancestor. Pleased to meet you, kid. Name's Totose, creator of Tessaiga. Okay. He nodded as he tilted his head, slightly confused. Is that all of your reaction? Totose asked after staring at him for a few moments, expecting a more astonished reaction out of the young boy. "Yeah," he answered, a bit confused, not understanding what he meant. "You could at least act surprised," the old man sobbed. "I should." He hit the final nail in the old man's pride. "He definitely is related to Inuyasha," he muttered in depression. The dark cloud of depression flowed above his head for a couple of minutes before he decided to talk again. "Anyway, Sesshomaru here requested me to give the sword a maintenance." "Maintenance?" the small boy asked, confused. "Yep, since you're the first one since Inuyasha to get a reaction from it, I went and gave it some small upgrades," he explained casually. "Like what?" "Since we live in an era when carrying a sword can get you arrested, I put a transforming spell on it," the old man explained with a sigh, while giving the sword to Issei. "Just call its name while thinking of it." Issei held the sword with his hands and did what he was told. "Okay. Tessaiga." The next moment the sword exploded into a small cloud of cyan dust. As the cloud cleared, the swords changed to a small silver bracelet with a miniature version of Tessaiga attached to it. "Oh, cool," Issei said in awe. "But why go through all the trouble? I could just leave it home." Everyone present looked at him with intense stares, the old man sighing to the young boy's ignorance. "You need to understand this, boy. Tessaiga has acknowledged that you have the potential to wield it. It hasn't acknowledged you as its rightful owner yet. This sword isn't like a sword you can buy from a blacksmith. You will need to prove to it that you are worthy of its power. For that you must always carry it with you and show it." "Prove to it," he said. "How am I supposed to do that?" Issei wondered to himself, not noticing that someone sneaked behind him. "Where did you get that bracelet, Issei?" a curious voice asked him. "Woa!" He jumped up from the couch and looked behind himself, sighing tired when he saw who it was. "You scared me, Mom." "Sorry, now tell, where did you get that?" Akira stared at the boy, not letting him have any chance to escape. Issei froze, small bullets of sweat dripping off his face. If there was one thing he could never do, was lie to his mom. No matter what he said, the woman would always know if he was lying. Such are the scary powers of a mother. "I found it." "Really?" She narrowed her eyes. "Ah, really?" he confirmed, resisting the urge to hide his face. "You sure?" her stare intensifying, making Issei feel like he was shrinking. Very sure," he muttered, trying not to slip and bite his tongue. "Fine." The woman sighed. She knew if Issei was hiding something, she will find out sooner or later. "It's a bit late, so you should get to bed. Don't forget tomorrow is your first day at the dojo." Issei almost choked when he heard this. It was the lie Yasaka came up with so he can come and train without his parents getting worried. She told the couple that the temple she works at also has a dojo and that Issei showed interest in joining. They did find it a bit odd that he can go there for free since dojos usually take tutoring fees, but Yasaka managed to convince them with her words alone. As the old saying goes, sly as a fox. "I'll go to bed in 10 minutes. He told her with a tired voice, feeling like he just dodged a bullet. After a few tired breaths, he sat back on the couch and started shuffling through channels on the TV, stopping on a news channel. Now in the following news, today the police has arrested a 50-year-old man who was displaying pornography material to the children of the city of Kuo. The man, identified as Ikaro Tomoki, responded by saying he was simply teaching the children the beauty of breasts, the newsreader said. After watching, Issei stared a few seconds, then turned it off. "Oh, okay, that was weird. The place they broadcasted was near my old neighborhood." The boy wondering if he would have met this old man if he didn't move to Kyoto. Somehow the idea caused Issei to shiver, not understanding why. The following day Issei went to the Inu clan temple to officially start his training. He was currently sitting in the courtyard together with Sesshomaru. Issei couldn't help but yawn tiredly. "Hua. You haven't slept enough, boy?" Sesshomaru asked from his seat. Truthfully, he wasn't interested, but he found this morning rather dull. "It's the first time I had to wake up at 6 a.m., he admitted tiredly to the white-haired man. "You will soon get used to it," Sesshomaru informed his so-called nephew. "If you say so." He nodded slightly. About 30 minutes passed and the sun was beginning to illuminate the whole city. "Say, uncle, who are we waiting for?" "We are waiting for the man who will be your physical trainer," he told Issei. "Physical trainer?" He tilted his head slightly, curious what kind of person will arrive. The youkai clan leader nodded his head. "Yes. You will need to train your body. This way you might awaken your youkai blood." "I see." Issei nodded in response, wondering what exactly will happen when he will awaken his youkai blood. Would he grow a tail by any chance, he wondered. His idea was cut off when he saw Sesshomaru stare at the sky intensely. He looked where he was looking and could see something in the sky. At first he thought it was a plane or a bird, but he soon dropped those possibilities since the object kept approaching at a very high speed. Before he knew it, the object crashed in the courtyard a few meters in front of them. As the smoke from the impact site cleared, a man could be seen. "Morning, pups," the man greeted in a laid-back manner. While Issei was busy processing how the man just crashed from the sky and looked like it wasn't something too special, Sesshomaru commented at his entrance. "You could have simply walked or teleported here, Sojobo. Where's the fun in that?" The man grinned at his fellow youkai. "You made a crater in my courtyard," Sesshomaru commented as he pointed to the huge crater Sojobo made when he landed. "Just make a fish pond out of it or something," Sojobo commented uninterested while his eyes locked on the still stunned Issei. "So this little runt here is my new student?" "Present yourself," Sesshomaru told, or rather ordered Issei. He broke out of his trance and walked in front of Sojobo. The latter could tell that the boy was nervous. "Why yes, I'm Issei Hyodo, pleased to meet you." He presented himself in a bashful manner. "Weak," the Tengu shouted at the young boy, making Issei jump backwards from the sheer power of his voice. "When you present yourself you need to puff your chest and say it loud so everyone hears it. Like this," the man declared as he hit his chest with the back of his fist. "Name Sojobo, boss of the Tengu clan." He shouted his name proudly, all people within a 3-kilometer radius hearing him. "And some people wonder why the Tengu clan is considered a clan of brutes." Sesshomaru sighed in annoyance. "Okay then Sesshomaru, I'm taking this brat with me to train," Sojobo said as he took up Issei and threw him over his shoulder. Sesshomaru stared at the red-skinned man with a curious look. "Bring him back in one piece." "Can't make any promises," he smirked to his friend. "Let's go, kid." "Huh?" Issei asked, confused as Sojobo jumped high in the sky. The next thing he knew, Issei was 100 meters up in the air. "Wah!" His terrified scream could be heard as the two of them were disappearing in the horizon. Sesshomaru stared at the sky and listened to the screams of the brown-haired boy. A single thought going through his mind. "I wonder if I was wrong when I included Sojobo in his training." After about a minute, which felt like an eternity for poor Issei, the two of them finally reached their destination. They were currently in the middle of a forest, Sojobo smiling as he stretched his body. "Phew, nothing's better than a morning jump in the sky." His eyes drifted on the small boy, curious by what he was doing. "Hey kid, why are you kissing the earth?" Issei had never been so grateful in his life to feel the earth under his feet. He could feel his heart like it was put in a washing machine. "I thought I was gonna die." "Ha ha, if you think that was scary, wait till you see your actual training." Sojobo chuckled hard. "Oh really?" he asked, a bit terrified, not wanting to imagine what this Tengu had in plan for him. "Really?" he smirked as he got close to Issei, his long red nose poking his forehead. "By the time we are done, you will be a fierce beast. You will be so tough that you will eat lightning and crap thunder," the man explained using his rather colorful language. Issei felt many complex emotions in that moment, but they were all overshadowed by a great sense of dread. He gulped hard as he began sweating. Please be gentle." For the rest of the morning, Issei's screams were the only thing that could be heard from the forest. When Sojobo and Issei finally finished the training, they went straight towards Yasaka's temple. Or it would be more exact to say that Sojobo dragged Issei there. "Well, here we are, kid," Sojobo told Issei as he landed inside the courtyard of the temple. This time he didn't make any craters under him. He looked at the boy over his shoulder and sighed with a bored expression. "Wow, you sure are faint-hearted. But no matter, in a few weeks you will be able to stare monsters in the eyes without blinking." The man chuckled as he began rethinking his training menu for the boy. Today's training session. Let's say he was expecting something else. He might have forgotten that Issei is still a 7-year-old human, and he just might have exaggerated just a little bit. Or perhaps he strayed on went all Spartan style on Issei and he passed out halfway through. Perhaps he might have been a bit too excited to have a student after so many years. And this was basic physical training. He didn't want to imagine how the kid will handle the combat part of the training. The delinquent-looking Tengu was so focused with thinking that he didn't notice that a person had approached him. "Oh, Sojobo-sama, it's been a while." A girl greeted the man in a respectful manner. Sojobo stopped his daydreaming and looked at the person. It was a small girl around Issei's age, with golden blonde hair tied in a ponytail and matching golden eyes. She has 9 golden foxtails and matching ears. Her attire is that of traditional shrine maiden outfit. The Tengu grinned a toothy smile to the young girl. Well, if it isn't Kuno-chan. You sure have grown since I last saw you. The girl blushed a bit. She wasn't embarrassed by his praising, she certainly wasn't. She bowed her head slightly to the man, trying to keep her princess appearance. Why thank you. Kuno noticed that there was a boy on the Tengu clan leader's shoulder. Who is that boy on your shoulder? The Tengu blinked a few times and looked at his shoulder. He actually forgot that Issei was there. He placed Issei on the ground in front of Kuno. This kid here is Inuyasha's descendant and the inheritor of Tessaiga. Kuno was silent for a few moments as she digested what the man just told her. What? She shouted in a shocked manner, not believing what she just heard. But he is a human, she declared. Even though she wasn't too versed when it came to the weapon known as Tessaiga, she did know that the sword can only be used by someone with youkai blood. Sojobo sighed in annoyance and scratched the back of his head. I know. Apparently we have to train him in order for him to become a youkai. Is that even possible? She asked with an awe-filled voice. Don't know, don't care. I don't have anything better to do, so I'm just putting the brat into shape. He shrugged his shoulders, not feeling like explain the whole story to the small girl. Say, where's your mom? She went to check on the ley lines, Kuno informed him. Oh, so I take it I have to wait. He snorted in annoyance. He didn't enjoy sitting and doing nothing. I apologize. Nah, it's no problem. He shrugged his shoulders. Say, is the kitchen empty? She tilted her head and placed her finger on her lower lip. I think so. Well, since the kid is out cold and I have to wait for Yusaka, might as well make some grub, Sojobo said as he cracked his neck. Should I ask the servants to gather you ingredients? Kuno asked the red-skinned man. Nah, no need. Food's better when you hunt it yourself, he said as he looked in the distance to a forest, a grin forming on his face. Watch over this brat, he will be out cold for a while. Okay, Kuno nodded. Good girl. I'll be back in a flash. He smirked as he dashed in the sky, heading towards the forest he saw. Kuno stood in place for a few minutes and stared at the sleeping form of Issei. She circled a few times around him, checking him from all angles, sniffing him a few times, even pushing her finger against his cheek. He is really just a human. I can't feel any trace of yoki from him, she concluded, her eyes drifting at his face, her own being right above his. I think he is my age. Ag. Issei frowned in his sleep, looking as if he was in pain. Is he waking up? She wondered as she stared at the boy. Gah! Issei gasped as he suddenly arched himself up, his head hitting against Kuno's. Next thing they knew, both of them were on their knees, clutching on their heads. Ouch, ouch. Issei was just confused as he was in pain. He looked in front of him and saw the Kuno sobbing in pain. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you, Issei muttered, panicked. That didn't hurt, she denied. The edges of her eyes were filled with tears, her forehead already throbbing red from the hit. You sure? It looks like it did, he asked, a bit doubtful. There's no way something like that could hurt. She turned her head to her left side and puffed her cheeks, trying to look like she was okay. If you say so. He nodded, a bit confused. He then noticed that he was in a temple, but he didn't recognize it. Say, where am I? We are at the Inari Temple, the Kitsune Yukai home temple, she told him as she rubbed her forehead. Who? He hummed as he tried to get up on his feet, only to get attacked by stabbing pain in his body. Ag. Are you alright? She asked Issei, who gasping in pain. My body feels like it's tearing apart. Issei muttered in pain. The effects of the training with Sojobo already could be felt on his body. Can't you heal yourself? Kuno asked, curious. Issei blinked a few times. I can do that. Kuno wanted to sigh, but she had to keep in mind that Issei is still human, so it would be a bit difficult for him to use healing techniques. Stay still for a moment, she told him as she put her hand over his back. Her hand began glowing in a fern-green light, resembling a small fire. Issei could feel something warm on his back. After a few minutes the light in her hand died out and she took her hand back. Issei, noticing this, tried to move. To his surprise, the pain has ceased. Wow, I feel all better. Don't rush yourself. I didn't heal you, I just numbed your muscles a little, she informed the boy, who was jumping around in excitement. I appreciate it anyway, thanks a lot. He closed his eyes and gave the girl a bright smile. She flinched when she saw his smile, her face turning to the side, a small blush forming in her cheeks. It's not much to be thanked for. I'm surprised you don't know something as basic as this. Issei felt like a rock just dropped on his head, a small sweat drop dripping on his head. Hey, I just started training today, he muttered in a depressed tone, his eyes trailing on Kuno's form. He couldn't help but notice that she resembled someone. Say, you look a lot like Yusaka-ne. Are you her little sister by any chance? Sister? Kuno tilted her head confused. Yusaka is my mother. Mother? His mouth hung open from the revelation. Of course. Didn't she mention me to you before? No. He muttered a bit awkward. He never imagined that Yusaka was a mother, let alone that she had a daughter his age. He then realized something. Ah. Right, I knew I was forgetting something. I'm Issei Hyodo. She stared at the boy, realizing that she never did present herself as well. My name is Kuno, daughter of Yusaka, leader of the youkai faction. Pleased to meet you, Kuno-chan, he smiled to the girl. Likewise. The two children spent the next hour talking. From serious things like how did Issei get involved in the supernatural world and how did the first day of training with Sojobo went, to simple things like Issei asking Kuno if he can play with her fox ears. That awarded Issei with a well-deserved slap on the face and Kuno calling him a pervert. The boy now knowing that randomly touching a youkai woman's tails or animal ears is considered sexual harassment. Stinging pain aside, Issei learned a few more things about youkai from Kuno. Apparently lands were divided among the clan leaders, each land having a certain aspect that was beneficial to the clan it belonged to. For instance, the Kappa clan were given land overflowing with ponds and lakes which were perfect for amphibian creatures. Another example was the Tengu clan occupied mountain areas which gave them more freedom to fly, which Issei found odd since Sojobo chose to jump instead of flying. Kuno couldn't help but find this simple conversation she was having with Issei rather enjoyable and fresh. It wasn't that the young girl didn't talk to other children her age, but they always talked to her as if they were talking to a princess, not a 7-year-old girl that simply wanted to have fun and play like any normal children. So she couldn't help but be intrigued by Issei, who treated her normally. None of the usual tension in the air, or the overly respectful attitude that she normally had to go through with other youkai children. They were just a pair of kids chatting without any concerns. This sensation felt very foreign to the young girl, but she enjoyed it. You two seem to have fun. A voice gathered their attention. It was a person Kuno knew very well. Uncle Shippo, Kuno exclaimed cheerfully, running and jumping in the man's arms. How is my favorite niece doing? He asked her as he played with her hair. I'm very fine. But that boy hit my head. She pointed towards Issei who was staring at them. Hey, it was an accident. Issei defended himself. Shippo put Kuno down and walked in front of Issei, his eyes studying his form. So you're Issei, right? Yep. He didn't get to say anything else as Shippo smacked him on the head with his fist. Ouch, Issei whined in pain. What was that for? He was silent for a few seconds, then he started scratching the back of his head, an awkward smile forming on his face. Sorry kid, nothing personal, but I owned Inuyasha that punch for a long time. So you had to hit me? He asked in between sobs. Well, you are his descendant, and you look a bit like him, so my hand kinda acted on its own. He replied a bit bashfully. Anyways, I think I started on the wrong foot. I'm Shippo, leader of the Kitsune clan and I will be in charge of your Jujutsu training. Okay. Issei nodded, hoping that the man in front of him isn't as vocal as Sojobo. Hey brats, the food is ready. Sojobo shouted from the other side of the temple, though it felt like he was doing it from behind them. Such are the lungs of a Tengu, especially a Dai Tengu. What Sojobo is cooking? Shippo asked in shock, his tails dancing behind him in excitement. Talk about lucky day. Alright, I'm starving, Issei chirped excited. Issei, Shippo and Kuno found their way to the back side of the temple where Sojobo had set a wooden table, filled with plates with food. The man was smirking and was holding a feather fan in his left hand and a knife in his right one. Okay, since you survived your first day I decided to prep some delicacies. Oh, you shouldn't have. Shippo commented as he took a seat at the table and extended his hand to pick up his chopsticks. Before he could pick them, Sojobo stabbed his knife in between the Vulpine man's fingers, the blade millimeters away from cutting his hand. Why are you sitting at the table for Foxbrat? To eat? He smiled innocently, a small sweat drop on his face. Really? How odd, I could swear that you are the same guy who transformed into me and tricked my men to dye their hair pink. Sojobo's eyes drifted over him, causing him to flinch and shiver. He chuckled dryly, scratching his head in embarrassment. Oh come on Sojobo, it was April's Fool's Day. I might have let it slide if it was an actual Japanese tradition. He informed him, his indication could be saw on his face. He flinched as Shippo was staring at him with a stare that could be compared to the stare of an injured puppy dog. He sighed in annoyance as he retracted his knife. I swear, it's too creepy to see a fox youkai making puppy dog eyes. Yay! The man laughed as he grabbed his chopsticks and a nearby bowl of food. Sojobo-sensei, Issei muttered in a disturbed voice. The man looked at the boy and noticed that he sat at the table, but he wasn't eating, he was just staring at the bowl in front of him with a terrified face. What's the matter, brat, not hungry? It's not that. It's just. What is this food? Issei asked, disturbed as he pointed to his bowl. The contents of his bowl resembled a dark beef stew, but instead of beef pieces, there were eyeballs. His eyes drifted at the other dishes. From what he could make out, the menu they were serving also contained a type of snake sashimi, salad with some rather dangerous-looking vegetables, stir-fry rice with a type of spiky meat, and ramen that had black soup, black noodles, and some rather insect-looking toppings. And these were all foods that Issei could somewhat tell what they were. Sojobo looked at him confused, nodding as he realized what was wrong. Or at least what he believed. Oh right, you're human. Better open your eyes and mouth wide, 'cause today I'm treating you to some Tengu delicacies. Delicacies? Issei muttered in dread, his eyes drifting on Shippo, who was slurping happily the noodles from the ramen that looked like it was cursed by the wrath of many failed chefs. Is something wrong? Shippo asked, confused. How can you eat that stuff? Issei asked in horror. What do you mean? Kuno asked him, confused. Issei drifted his eyes on her, who was eating some of the mysterious rice. Tengu cuisine is very tasty. Sojobo-sama also happens to be a great cook. Issei took a look at the bowl in front of him. He could swear that the eyeballs in it were staring right at him. He gulped hard as his chopsticks found their way to the bowl, trembling as they picked a piece of the food and got it close to his mouth. Oh well. Hakuna Matata. Issei quoted from a movie he saw as he took a bite of the food. He could feel a crunchy texture, yet when he chewed he felt something similar to gelatin filling his mouth. All of that aside, he couldn't help but mutter. It's good. He started sampling all the dishes one by one. His surprise kept increasing as he ate. It's actually really good, he said in disbelief, getting the attention of the said person who made. Of course it's good. Do you think I would serve nasty food? Who do you take me for? Sojobo asked Issei, a bit of indignation on his face. Sorry. I never had food this exotic. He stuttered, not trying to upset the red-skinned man. He was a rather temperamental person after all. The Tengu shrugged his shoulders, then pointed his chopsticks toward Shippo. Better eat up then, otherwise the fox brat will leave you starving. Issei took a look at him and saw that he almost emptied his side of the table and was moving towards his own. No fair, Issei protested. After their little lunch, Sojobo went to take a nap under one of the cherry trees in the courtyard, letting Shippo take his turn at teach Issei. The two boys, plus Kuno, went to one of the training rooms within the Inari temple. Issei wondered why Kuno joined them though. Okay kid, it's time I teach you about Yujutsu, Shippo explained. Now, even though you can't use Yujutsu or Yoki yet, it would be a good idea to teach you the basics now so you won't ask me later. Okay. Issei nodded from his seat. Yujutsu is a form of magic exclusive only to youkai. If you are wondering why, it's because it uses yoki, which is an energy that only youkai can create. Any questions? What exactly does Yujutsu do? He tilted his head slightly. Many things. The foxman snickered. You see, Yujutsu doesn't have a fixed form. It's the overall name of the natural abilities that youkai are born with or can learn. It usually depends on what kind of youkai you are, taking advantage of your inhuman characteristics. You might have heard in stories that many youkai are creatures of mischief. We always had to blend ourselves within the human, so many of us use Yujutsu for creating illusions or changing our physical appearance. He explained as he transformed into Issei as demonstration, the original jumping back in shock. While the species of youkai you are may influence your options at what you can do, it doesn't mean you can't make use of other abilities besides the common ones. He turned back into his real form. Let's take Kitsune youkai like me and Yasaka. We specialize in illusions and fire-based attacks. He exemplified by creating a blue fireball in the palm of his hand. Wow! Issei muttered in awe as he saw the flames dancing at the very tips of his fingers. His eyes drifted then to Kuno, who was looking unimpressed. Say Kuno, can you do any trick like that? Of course I can. She puffed her cheeks proudly. Kitsunebi, Zanka. As she declared the name of the technique, dozens of small embers began appearing all around Kuno, floating gently and burning in the air. Issei was entranced by how the small lights danced in the air, his curiosity getting the better of him, and he touched one of them. He winced in pain. Kuno couldn't help but chuckle at him. Who in their right mind would touch something that is obviously piping hot? After she and Shippo finished laughing at Issei's pain, the later decided to continue his lesson. Now let's take youkai like Sesshomaru. They specialize in claw-based attacks and enhancing their senses. He explained, Issei nodding and looking at his fingernails. Now about yoki. It's an energy source that youkai are born with. It's somewhat weak in young youkai, but as they grow older their yoki naturally increases and gets stronger. It gets even stronger if the respective youkai trains, so many chose to train rather than wait to age. Let's take an Inu youkai for instance. When they're young their claws could be sharp enough to cut through trees, but in time they could even cut diamonds. Cool. Issei nodded. Since you are supposed to be an Inu youkai like Inuyasha, my advice is that we should concentrate on claw-based attacks, physical and sense enhancements. Okay. He nodded, as he waved his hand in the air, mimicking the attack of a tiger. Now let's start some demonstrations. Shippo snickered as dozens of small flames appeared behind him. After the lesson with Shippo was done, they all went back into the courtyard. Their current moods were various. Issei was angry, Kuno seemed amused and Shippo had an awkward look on his face. Shippo took a look at Issei, the latter turning his face to the other side. Shippo rubbed the back of his head and sighed. Oh come on, you're still mad at me? A small vein mark appeared on Issei's head. He turned his head and looked at Shippo, his face covered in ash. You set me on fire when you were showing of your foxfire, Shippo-sensei. It wasn't on purpose, he muttered embarrassed. Tell that to my hair. My parents kill me if I go back home without any hair. Issei sighed. Okay, I'm sorry. The man apologized, Issei sighing tiredly in response. It didn't help that Kuno was chuckling the whole time at his misfortune. So did you manage to learn anything today? Kuno asked after she dropped her laugh. A bit. But it's all new and confusing for me, Issei sighed. It might be all weird at first, but when you awaken your powers we'll start real practice and you will understand it much easier. Shippo reassured the brown-haired boy. I see. Issei nodded as he looked at his fox-like teacher, suddenly remembering something he said earlier when they talked. Say Shippo-sensei, I wanted to ask, did you personally knew Inuyasha? Know him? He tilted his head, a smug smile forming on his face. We used to travel together when I was kid. The boy was silent for a few moments, a large number of questions rushing through his head, but only one he found really important. Can you tell me about him? Yasaka-ne keeps saying that he is a hero of the youkai race, but I don't even know anything about him. So that's it, huh? He smirked as he placed his hand over his chin. Let's see, what would be the best word to describe Inuyasha? He hummed as he was thinking, smiling as he looked seriously at Issei. An idiot. An idiot? He asked confused. Yep, one of the biggest ones I have ever met. I mean he often behaved childishly and was incredibly hot-headed and easy to upset, often striking out with his fists toward the source of his annoyance. He even occasionally struck young kids if they bothered him, which was often the case with me. He was impatient by nature and could be very prideful, having much difficulty admitting he was wrong about something. It was a nightmare when he and Kagome argued. Issei took in everything he said. His smile disappeared and in place a disappointed look took its place. When everyone kept saying, hero, hero, he imagined some kind and great individual like the ones in books and movies. Guess he isn't what I imagined. He muttered in a disappointed voice. A small smile formed on the fox yukai's face as he stared at the sky. But in spite of all those, I never met a man who I looked up to more than him. He was someone who put the lives of his friends and loved ones over his own. Even if he was seriously wounded, he would completely forget about his pain the moment someone he was trying to protect was in danger. He acted most of the time like he didn't care and kept a tough guy act, but deep down he cared for people, regardless if they were humans or youkai. He kept staring in the blue sky, memories of his adventures together with him and his old flashing through his mind. A sad yet nostalgic look could be seen in his eyes. Sometimes I can't believe so much time has passed. When he heard those kind words about Inuyasha, Issei couldn't help but feel a little proud to be related to him, his smile returning. You said you traveled with him. Were there other people with you? Yeah. Their names were Moroku, Sango, Karara and Kagome. Moroku was a monk, but a really perverted one. He used to ask any beautiful woman he meet to bear his child. Sango was Yukai Slayer. She had a thing for Moroku and would always beat him up when he went all playboy with other women. Karara was a nekomata that was Sango's partner. Kagome was a human girl that helped Inuyasha on his quest. The two of them would always fight and argue whenever they got the chance. But in truth those two were in love with each other. That sounds like a weird group. The boy commented. He didn't understand how a youkai slayer could travel with them, and the perverted monk part. We sure were. He chuckled hard at his words. I'm starting to feel nostalgic all of a sudden. Those sure were the days, when Moroku would go and ask women to bear his child and Sango would beat him up for it. When Inuyasha and I would argue and Kagome would tell him to sit. He laughed as he remembered the good old days, a small tear running down his face. Can't believe it's just me and Karara left from the team. Did I upset you? Issei asked a bit awkward, believing he was crying because of him. He shook his head and whipped his face with the sleeve of his yukata. Nah, just remembering my long-gone friends. He smiled as he patted Issei on his head. Was Uncle friends with you too? Issei asked curious. Uncle? Oh, you mean Sesshomaru. Well, he kinda wanted to kill Inuyasha back then. He rubbed the back of his head nervously, a small sweat drop dripping on his face. Issei blinked confused. Kill him? But weren't they brothers? Let's just say Sesshomaru and Inuyasha never got along. Kuno decided to give her own thoughts on the matter. Curious. Sesshomaru-sama is a rather calm man, I can't imagine him acting violent. A tired laugh exited Shippo's mouth. Trust me, Kuno-chan. Sesshomaru isn't as domestic as he appears. It may be because there hasn't been any major incident since you were born, so there wasn't any chance to see his strength. But Sesshomaru doesn't hold the title of the strongest youkai for nothing. His fox ears and tails trembled nervously. I shiver when I remember the days when he fought against us. Especially when he rampaged in the war. War? Issei asked confused. Oh right, guess I should explain. Well, it all started when. Hey! A powerful shout made all of them jump from their seats, all three of them grabbing on their heads in pain. Did you really need to shout Sojobo? Shippo muttered in pain as he turned and looked at the approaching Tengu. You call that shout? He snickered arrogantly. Anyway kids, I need to get this brat back to the Inu temple before Sesshomaru starts chewing on my ass for being late. Already? Kuno pouted in response. Don't worry Kuno-chan, you can have more fun with him tomorrow. Shippo snickered as he pinched her cheek, only to make her blush in embarrassment. I don't know what you are talking about. She denied the implications of her wanting to see Issei more. Come on brat, say your goodbye and let's go, Sojobo told his new student. Well, it's been fun meeting you Kuno. See you tomorrow, he told the girl as he walked to next to Sojobo. Bye Kuno, bye Shippo-sensei. Truthfully, Kuno wouldn't have minded if Issei would have stayed a little longer, but she gave in and accepted to wait until tomorrow. Have a safe trip. She smiled to her new human acquaintance. Don't drop him on the way Sojobo. Shippo joked as he knew how Sojobo tended to walk. Issei froze in place, his face drained of color and slowly looked up with trembling eyes to Sojobo. Wait. Please tell me we are walking there. The man looked at Issei for a few moments, a wide smirk spreading on his face. Nope, he declared as put Issei over his shoulder and blasted in the sky. Ah! Issei screamed in fear as they vanished in the sky, a small flash of light appearing in their place. Why does this scene seem familiar? Kuno wondered. That's some scream for a human. Shippo whistled amused. Interesting isn't he? A voice said from behind. It was Yasaka. Oka-sama! Kuno exclaimed as she ran to her mother's side. The older woman hugging and patting the Kunu's head. Oh, hey there Yasaka-ne. Finished checking the ley lines? Shippo asked. Yes. They were fine as always. She informed her cousin. Now tell me, what do you think of Issei-kun? Shippo dropped his carefree smile and took on a more serious look. Hard to tell. Personality-wise he is a nice kid. It's rare to meet a human these days that isn't scared of youkai. Power-wise. I have to wait until he awakens his powers. That is a day I am interested to see myself. Yasaka hummed with a smile. Well, guess I'll get going too. You know that the Kitsune clan tends to cause trouble when I'm gone. Shippo sighed tiredly, wondering what went through his head when he accepted the position of clan leader. I know all too well. Yasaka smiled amused to Shippo. Well, see you later. Shippo waved his hand as he left. So tell me Kuno, what do you think of our new student? Yasaka asked her daughter. He is a bit odd, she admitted, though she didn't meet any humans before so she didn't really had much to compare him to. But he is also very interesting. She took a moment and thought about him, a bright smile radiating on her face. I think he is the first person my age who treated me as a normal person. Yasaka looked at her daughter for a few moments, she put her hand over her cheek and smiled at her. Oh my, perhaps my little girl will finally make a friend and stop causing me so much trouble. That's mean Oka-sama. The following days have passed very quickly. Issei had got to meet and train with his other teachers. Each one of them were unique in their own ways, and their training methods seemed to differ. Since they couldn't all train him on the same days, they decided to each take a day of the week. A two-man teaching pair per day, with the weekends off. The first part of the pair was sojobo since physical training was mandatory, and the others took a certain day of the week. Monday Yujutsu day with Shippo. Issei couldn't help but feel like his fox teacher was what people call a man-child. Not only did the man have a rather childish personality, but he also had a habit of exemplifying the Yujutsu techniques he was explaining to Issei. That's why he would take Issei with him downtown and play tricks on unlucky passing people. Laughs and jokes aside, Issei discovered the unwritten rule of running away as fast as you can after you do a prank you and have your laugh. The poor boy had to learn this the hard way. Tuesday Senjutsu day with Karara. Senjutsu training was interesting, to say the least. Unlike a Yujutsu that takes advantage of a yukai's body and imagination, Senjutsu takes advantage of the state of mind of the user. Issei was sitting down on the floor in half-lotus position, which took him half an hour to do it the proper way. In front of him was Karara, who was sitting full lotus position and had her eyes closed. No, not like that. Karara told Issei, her eyes still closed. It's not enough to just close your eyes. You need to try and clear your mind, but at the same time keep yourself aware of your surroundings. Issei's face trembled a little, not really understanding the whole need for meditation. Is this really necessary, Karara-sensei? Meditation is the first step in using senjutsu. If one fails to master the first step, he might just get corrupted, she explained. Issei opened his eyes and stared confused at her. Corrupted? Karara sighed and opened her eyes. Yes, you see, the concept of using senjutsu is the power to control the flow of life energy, or more commonly known as ki. Life energy? Ki? He tilted his head confused. It is an intangible energy inside every living being. It's not only limited to youkai, even regular humans, animals and plants possess it. But the problem is that it's difficult to tap into it. While it can be used by most creatures, there are species that are more adept towards using it. The Nekomata race from which I originate is such an example. He nodded, then realized that something was off in her explanation. But how can I use it if it's intangible? Think of it like energy stored inside of the body. In order for a person to use it, he must open channels in his body for it flow in it. It's very similar to the circular system, the energy being the blood, and the channels being the blood vessels. In simple terms, you must learn how to pump the ki through your body, similar to a heart. However, she got up and brought a nearby plant in front of Issei. The channels aren't just in the body, they also connect your body to the surrounding environment. When one learns to control his ki, he will be able to draw and exchange energy with nature itself. She explained as the plant began glowing the moment she touched it, growing and blooming in a beautiful flower. But this is where the problems may occur. What do you mean? Not all the energy in nature is a positive one. You see, there is an energy known Jackie, she explained, her tone growing much colder. Jackie? He asked, puzzled. Think of it as the malice and ill will that floats in the world. If one uses senjutsu and absorbs Jackie, they will basically absorb negative emotions that float around, slowly corrupting him, and in worst cases twisting them so horribly that they may end up as a bloodthirsty beasts. Issei gulped hard in fear. Guess the old saying that evil is lurking in the shadows wasn't too off. In a sense, but you see, not all places in the world is filled with Jackie. There are places that are overflowing with it, but at the same time there are some rare places that aren't tainted by it. Why is it like that? He asked, not understanding why some places have it and others don't. Jackie can either be created by nature itself or by people. If nature is abused or destroyed, it won't simply let it go, and it will create Jackie in its pain, she explained. But also, if a person dies and his spirit is filled with regret or other negative emotions such as hate or despair, those emotions won't just disappear and will instead linger around as Jackie. From my knowledge, the place overflowing with Jackie would be Yomi. Yomi? Issei wondered, the word sounded familiar, but he could ask about it later. So there's a chance that if I use senjutsu I will also use Jackie? Not exactly. If trained properly, you will learn how to filter the Jackie, a way to let the ki from nature enter your body while at the same time preventing the Jackie from entering. Aha, Issei nodded. I'm sure you know most of the stories that involve youkai depict them as malicious and evil creatures. While there are many that are evil by their own nature, There are many of them ended up like that because they used Jackie until it corrupted them. I feel sorry for them. Issei muttered in sad tone. He really did find it sad for people to turn evil against their own will. Karara smiled at the boy and patted him on the head. Those kind feelings help you in rejecting the Jackie. Issei chuckled lightly, enjoying the feeling of having his hair played with. A sudden question going through his head. I'm curious, does Jackie grant any powers? Her smile dropped, a cold and serious look taking over her features. Corruption. What? Issei asked nervously. I don't know about humans, but when it comes to youkai they could use the Jackie to directly corrupt people or objects. A form of possession by the Jackie causing the victim to succumb to its evil powers. She explained, dead serious. Scary. Issei muttered, the thought of him getting turned into some kind of rampaging monster was scarring him. Very. I've seen many cases of youkai corrupted by Jackie and what they did with their newfound powers, but only one person truly scared me. The feline woman explained, her two tails trembling slightly. Issei gulped hard, trying to stop himself from asking, but he was way too curious. Who is it? Karara looked at him, the pupil of her eyes becoming slits and her claws extending as if ready for attack. She let out a tired sigh. It would seem today's lesson would end. Have you ever heard of Naraku? Issei was listening with steel concentration as Karara told him about Inuyasha's greatest enemy. Wednesday sparring day with Koga and Soten. Issei was never in a serious fistfight, but he did believe that he knew enough to know how to throw a punch. Boy, he was wrong. Are you an idiot? Koga, the wolf youkai, shouted at Issei, who was trying to assume a defensive stance. He wasn't expecting too much from a human kid, but he really didn't expect him to suck this bad. What kind of dumbass doesn't know how to make a proper fist? He asked in an annoyed voice as the boy in front of him was holding his thumb inside of the fist. If you hit something with a fist like that, you will break your thumb, dumbass. Issei panicked and tried to fix his fist. Like this? He looked at the boy's fist, his eyes twitching as a vein began bulging in his forehead. That's too loose, he shouted to Issei, trying to resist the urge to kick him. Is this better? He asked, a bit scared, only to get more drilling from the wolf youkai. Keep your guard higher. Keep your legs closer. You dropped your guard again. Something tells me that it will be a while until I can train the kid. Soten thought to herself as she took a puff from her pipe. Thursday barrier lessons day with Shiori. Barrier lessons. While Issei didn't find the subject as interesting as senjutsu or yujutsu, he was glad that Shiori wasn't as difficult as Sojobo and Koga. That aside, he always thought that barriers are something pretty easy to understand. Use one to protect yourself, and you overpower the enemy's barrier to break through it. He has yet again found out he was very wrong. Right now, for instance, he was just experiencing what could happen if a person ventures in enemy territory and that said enemy created a barrier that has a mind-affecting property. It's for this reason that Issei was on the floor looking like he just ate a few halogenic mushrooms. Shiori waved her hand in the air. Immediately after, Issei seemed to regain his senses. Do you now see what I meant when I said that barriers are more practical than people think? Issei got up from the floor, whipped the trail of saliva that on his face, and looked at his teacher. Guess you were right, Shiori-sensei. He nodded slightly as the room stopped spinning around him, and his head stopped feeling like a firecracker exploded in it. It's best if you understand this by my hands rather than enemy ones. The white-haired beauty explained. While she was by no means a person to intentionally hurt someone just to prove her point, she was told by the other teachers the boy had that he was a bit of a slow-learned and a more practical demonstration would help him. That aside, as I explained to you, barriers aren't just a means to protect one's body. She began. The concept of a barrier is actually to turn a limit area around you into your own territory. Turn it in my territory? The brown-haired boy asked. Exactly. There are two basic forms of barrier, limited type and area type, she elaborated. The limited type is the type of barrier one uses to block an incoming attack, the sort of barrier that is used in battle and for protecting yourself. There are various forms, but the idea is the same, manipulating and bending your power, using it to create a barrier around or in front of your body. The area type, on the other hand, is used for long-lasting operations. They are the type that are used on one's base, using them to block, confuse, weaken and in some cases even curse the enemies. Unlike limited types that can be used almost instantly, area types take more time to be deployed, and usually require more than just one person to maintain it, but in terms of efficiency they are the better choice. I think I get it. Issei nodded, somehow comparing the explanations to how some anime characters use barriers. That's great. The purple-eyed woman chirped happily. Now let's begin the theoretical parts about barriers. Issei nodded, not knowing how much he will hate this lessons later on. Friday Youkai History Day with Hira. If Issei would have said that the lessons with the Oni woman were interesting, he would be lying. While he can't say they were boring, they were still history lessons. And Issei was still a 7-year-old kid, so you can guess how well they went. The lessons aside, Issei began considering checking if any of the downtown libraries have any official guidebooks regarding youkai species, something like an encyclopedia, because almost all of the youkai he met look nothing like the youkai he reads in books and hear from stories. A fine example is Hira. Most stories depict Oni as violent, savage, bloodthirsty monsters wielding oversized iron clubs, using bones as accessories and carrying huge bottles of sake. But the woman in front of Issei is as delicate and charming as a flower. If it weren't for the 2 horns on her forehead and her unusual colored eyes, she would look like a human. A really tall one, but still. She doesn't even have any violent behavior one would expect from an Oni. In fact, she is almost as ladylike as Yusaka. Another mind-blowing factor is that Hira, even though she is an Oni, who are known for being carnivores to the level of eating even humans, is actually a vegetarian. He really needs a guidebook. The woman's pale yellow orbs drifted on Issei's wondering stare, sighing as she felt like she was talking to the walls. Is my lesson boring, Issei-kun? The Oni asked. The boy blinked confused a few times, then straightened up in his seat and began panicking, trying to think of an excuse. And no, that's not that, Hira-sensei. He stuttered, sweating fast as he wasn't finding any plausible excuses. The woman walked in front of him and bowed her head to his level to look him in the eyes. She didn't seem necessarily angry, but she wasn't happy as well. Then please tell, is there anything you have on your mind? The boy's eyes drifted to his sides, not being able to stare the raven-haired beauty in the eyes. As his eyes tried to find a piece of the floor to stare to, they landed on the trinket that was tied around his wrist. A sudden flash of brilliance struck him. I was wondering. Can you tell me why everyone calls Inuyasha a hero? He asked with a half voice. Even though everyone keeps telling me about him, I don't even know what made him a hero in first place. The woman looked confused at the boy, but then she remembered that Sesshomaru wasn't exactly a very chatty person, so who could blame the boy for not knowing his ancestor's story? Very well, but in order for you to understand why he became a hero, you must learn of a war that took place in our land centuries ago. War. Issei remembered Shippo saying something about one as well. Were they talking about the same one? A war? He asked in confirmation. Her eyes seemed to sadden as she nodded. Yes. I should warn you though, the story of how Inuyasha became a hero isn't a happy one. It's one of a martyr. The boy swallowed the air in his mouth, a sense of fright lingering in his stomach. But he needed to know. Please tell me anyway. She nodded slightly. Okay. But first you must learn about other supernatural creatures. Other? He asked curious, remembering Yusaka and Sesshomaru speaking about something like this before. Yes, just like we youkai exist, so do other creatures and monsters from stories and mythology. Almost all of the mythological pantheons exist. The youkai faction, for instance, is part of the Shinto pantheon. So Amaterasu, Zeus and Odin really exist? He asked curious, as these were all popular gods he heard from stories. They do. But we will talk about them on a different occasion, because the faction that concerns your ancestor is the biblical faction, she explained to the boy. Biblical faction? It's a term that refers to the beings that originated from the Bible. There are 3 races that originate from it. She explained in a rather simple way. Truthfully, that wasn't even their real name, but rather a title that other pantheons decided on. The angels led by the God from the Bible, the devils led by Satan and his devil lords, and the fallen angels led by Azazel. From what we know, a war took place between those 3 races. A war that lasted for more than a millennia, and was later named the Great War by them. Steam could be seen flowing out of Issei's head as he was trying to process everything she said. So devils and angels exist, God and Satan also exist, Azazel, who he didn't know who that was, exists, and apparently they all had a 3-way war, and surprisingly the apocalypse didn't begin. This was only making Issei more confused than informed. Who won the war? Was it God, Satan, or that Azazel guy? None, she stated, her answer making Issei even more confused. You see, Issei-kun, their war had no winner or loser because it was interrupted. He tilted his head slightly, his arms folded around his chest. Interrupted? By what? No, what? Who? She got up and went to a nearby drawer and took out an old-looking book from it. She flipped through the pages and put book in front of Issei when she was done. The 2 pages where the book was opened contained the drawn pictures of 2 dragons, one of burning red and the other of pure white. Issei looked confused at the pictures, then he looked back at Hira, the woman, then returning to her explaining. The ones that interrupted the war were the 2 heavenly dragons, the red dragon Emperor Diedrich and the white dragon Emperor Albion. Dragons really exist? He asked in shock, but immediately a smile took over his face, and small sparks could be saw in his eyes. Cool, he shouted in excitement as any normal 7-year-old kid would if they found out dragons are real. Hira sighed, tired at the boy's reaction. He clearly didn't realize what dragons really are. I wouldn't be as excited as you are. Dragons are creature of pure power, unbounded by the laws of the world as we are. They are the ones that represent freedom, as they never needed to submit themselves to other factions and follow what they believe it's best for them. Their strength is their testament to this fact. She stopped for a moment and took a deep breath. In this world there are many creatures of great power, but the ones that reign over all of them are the dragons. While there are dragons who chose to side with other factions, they did it on their own terms, due to various reasons. Are dragons really that dangerous? He asked. Hira could only stare at him in astonishment, as if the boy just asked her if lava is really warm. Very. She stated, dead serious. A low-level dragon can decimate a large human city in a matter of hours. But a heavenly dragon could probably vaporize it without any trace left in less than 10 seconds. He nodded in fear, noting to himself if he ever met a dragon he would be respectful. But why did they interrupt in the war? No one knows why exactly, but the 2 heavenly dragons always had a rivalry of sorts with each other, however they never went all out. That changed when the Great War was at its end. The air around became cold all of a sudden, only seriousness could be seen on the woman's face. Out of nowhere the 2 heavenly dragons appeared in the middle of the battlefield and fought each other, and I don't mean a spar or an argument fight, they both wanted to kill the other. Their rampage completely changed the course of the war as they fought without bothering to even look at the nearby people, their attacks destroying anyone nearby. All of the present parties of the war realized that if the 2 dragons would continue their fight, they would without a doubt get annihilated in the process. She explained as she looked at the picture of the 2 legendary dragons. The only solution they could find was make a truce, and stand together against the dragons. At the cost of many lives, they were able to kill the dragons and seal away their souls in sacred gears. Sacred gears? Hira sighed. She knew that she was gonna cover most of supernatural lessons with him, but she didn't expect she will have so much work to do. They are a type of weapon created by the God from the Bible, bestowed on humans as a way of enacting miracles on earth. It may came as a surprise to you, but many of the legendary heroes that were recorded in history were in fact sacred gear users. What do they do? He asked, interested, something in his head telling him that they did more than just make a person physical stronger. They come in various forms. From ones that can allow one limited control over an element, to some that have the power to change the very balance of the world. But let's not derivate too much from our initial discussion, she told the boy as she closed the book. After the dragons were sealed, the 3 biblical factions were far too exhausted to continue the war, realizing that should they continue they will simply die and be forgotten. So they kept the state of truce, though it didn't help to get rid of the old grudges. A few hundred years after the war ended, a new one began for the devil side, but this one wasn't against an enemy, but among themselves. He was listening carefully, but the last part set him, of course. Wait, what? Apparently after years of rebuilding their cities and forces, the descendants of the original's leaders were unsatisfied with the results of the war and they wanted to restart it. This was when the devils broke into 2 sides, the old Satan faction that wanted to continue the war and the anti-Satan faction that desired to keep peace. Eventually it was anti-Satan faction that won and drove out the old Satan faction into hiding or exile. Her face darkened and bitter. This is when we became involved with the devils. Issei swallowed hard, knowing that things now will interest him as well. You see, there were many among the members of the old Satan faction that though since they can't rule over hell, they might search for alternatives. For instance, lands where the Christian influence has yet to take roots. A land such as Japan. One of the descendants of the original Mammon, a man by the name of Serious Mammon, took his chance and tried to turn Japan into his own devil territory. At that time we didn't know what the current state of affairs in hell was, so the attack he orchestrated against us was sudden and powerful. Didn't you fight against him? Issei asked. Even if they were attacked there shouldn't be a reason not to fight them. Some tried. But most of the youkai fled away, she admitted in shame. The situation was simply too much in their favor. Not only weren't we expecting a war, but the biggest issue we faced was that we youkai weren't unified. Unified? Youkai were by nature solitaire creatures. It was rare for youkai of the same race to stay in packs or clans, let alone youkai of different races. We simply were scattered all over the lands, each claiming a piece of land and spending their time there. The numbers aside, their leader Sarius was a very formidable enemy. His demonic power was so great that he could vaporize a whole village without as much as breaking a sweat, so it was difficult finding people brave enough to fight him and his army or devils, let alone unify them. Issei was trying to understand, but was failing too. Then, how did you win? It was difficult. We placed all of our hopes on Sesshomaru. The invasion began in Fukushima, and during that time Sesshomaru was traveling. He was somewhere around Nagasaki when it began. When he found out what was going on, he rushed back, gathering powerful allies along the way. But he wouldn't make it in time. Most of the youkai that didn't have the will to fight had gathered and headed towards Kyoto. But Sarius and his army caught up with them. Everything looked like it was over. By the time reinforcements would have arrived, they would have all died. A small and proud smile radiated on her face as she explained the next part. All if not for the courage of one single man. The Hanyo Inuyasha, she declared proudly, her words making Issei lose his air. All his attention focused on every word she said. Even though he was long past his prime, he chose to stay and fight all alone so that the other youkai could flee to safety. She trailed as she remembered that day. She was nothing but a child when it all happened, but she still remembers how he looked. Standing all alone in front of the enemy army, his long white hair flowing in the wind, his back looking like he was holding the world on his back, his harsh, yet warm voice telling them all to run away to safety. Just he alone with only Tessaiga in his hands. He held a legion of over 50,000 devils at bay. He alone fought them, unleashing the full might of the Tessaiga on them, sending more than 70% of their fighters to Yomi. He was able to hold them enough for the civilians to retreat and for reinforcements to arrive. But even he had his limits. Her smile faded and got replaced by a bitter frown. When Sesshomaru and the others arrived to fight, Inuyasha was already beyond help. The injuries he suffered would have long killed even the greatest of warriors, but he still refused to fall. It was a miracle itself that he survived until reinforcements arrived. But the most they could do was ease his pain as he was dying on the battlefield. A heavy silence filled the room as the woman looked at the boy. A dazed look could be saw in her eyes. The most astonishing thing is that even though he was slowly dying, he was smiling. This was something that he didn't expect of hearing. Smiling? But why? She waved her hand in denial. I don't know, only the ones that saw him die that day may know. But what I know is that his selfless sacrifice was what ignited the flames of courage into many. The forces gathered by Sesshomaru, together with others that were inspired by him, defeated the remaining forces and drove out the devils out of our lands. She told with a gentle and proud smile. All possible because of your ancestors' courage. Issei felt warm. He didn't know what exactly to expect, or why did people call his so-called ancestor a hero. But now he knew for sure. Inuyasha is a true hero. Someone he could take great pride in saying he is related to. He could feel his hands trembling in excitement as he looked at the Tessaiga bracelet on his wrist. After a few moments of calming down, he remembered something that Yusaka and Sesshomaru talked about when they first met him. Say, I'm curious. Yusaka said that my old town is devil territory. If the devils were defeated and driven out, how is there devil territory in Japan? She blinked confused for a moment. Oh, you can call it one of the scars left by the invasion. She trailed. Within Japan, and many other regions of the world, there are invisible conduits of magical power that flow through the earth and air called ley lines. Think of them as limitless streams of magical energy, she elaborated. Learning to tap and control the powers of the ley lines can grant one unimaginable power. She walked near the window and pointed outside to the city. Our city is such an example. The dimensional barriers surrounding it would be impossible to maintain if it weren't for the ley lines. Now the reason why there is devil territory within the Shinto territory is because Sarius somehow altered a main branch ley line within Japan. Altered? Yes. We don't know how he did it, but if that ley line was left alone, it would have caused severe side effects. When a youkai, or daiyukai, tried to control it, it simply didn't work. Not only that, but those ley lines now attracted other devils, and even fallen angels. We kept fighting back against them, but it was getting very difficult. Her eyes flared a little as she spoke. It was then that we meet the leader of the newly reformed Devil Society, the Crimson Satan Seersex Lucifer. I can imagine he wasn't really welcomed here. Issei sighed with a dry chuckle. The woman rolled her eyes and sighed. That's an understatement. I still wonder if the man is without fear or an idiot for walking into our territory after everything that happened because of Sirius. Hera commented dryly as she remembered the day the Crimson Lucifer appeared in the middle of their encampment. But we couldn't risk full-scale war with Hell for attacking their leader, so we listened to what he had to say. What did he want? The brown-haired boy asked, really curious. He heard of what Sirius has done to us in the ley lines, and came to us with an offer. He would offer medical, magical, and financial support to us in exchange for letting the territory around the altered ley lines to come under devil jurisdiction, and they maintain those ley lines. By doing so, the devil clan that will be put in charge of it will be tasked of making sure that the ley line stays stable and won't cause any unexpected repercussions. At first many of us were enraged by his offer. But we were going through a difficult time, and truthfully speaking it was a win-win situation for us, she explained. We understood that those were all the actions of a single greedy devil, not the ones the devil race itself. Sirzex and his new devil government tried their best to make amends for what was done to us. There is still lingering animosity against devils, but it has lessened during the years. We now have somewhat of a non-aggression act. Devils can't venture into youkai territory without getting proper approval, but it is the same case with youkai in devil territory, Hera told him. This is all a lot to take in. Devils, youkai, wars. Issei muttered under his breath, trying to sort everything he learned today. Truly, everything felt like his mind was getting stuffed with these new informations. As he tried to make his way through the waves of thoughts that were flowing through his head, he seemed to have noticed something was off in Hera's story. But I don't understand one thing. You said that the youkai faction is part of the Shinto faction. So why didn't they help you when you were attacked? The look on the woman's face became a little bitter, her eyes half shutting. It's not that the gods of Takamagahara didn't want to help us, on contrary, they would have never allowed any devils to desecrate their sacred lands. But something happened while we were under attack. Something that made the gods unable to interfere. What happened? She took the book she showed Issei and opened it again. This time however it wasn't a picture of Diedrich and Albion, but the picture of forest green Asian dragon, his gigantic body encircling a palace made out of what seemed to be coral, which seemed to be on the bottom of the sea. She took a moment and pointed at the dragon. Ryujin. The great dragon that ruled the seas of our lands. He went mad and attacked Takamagahara. Why did he do that? Issei asked concerned. Hera waved her head. We don't know. Even among dragons, Ryujin was a kind and just person. He would have never done something like that. We never understood what happened, but many speculate that something must have happened for him to attack his own comrades. Some believe that Sirius might have had something to do with his rampage. She sighed and closed the book. The reason the Shinto gods weren't able to interfere was because they were too busy in stopping Ryujin from destroying Takamagahara. Was it really so hard to stop him? He asked, somewhat skeptical. He may not know the exact number, but from what he heard there are quite a number of Shinto gods. There are many strong dragons left in the world, like 5 great dragon kings. But Ryujin was a dragon that possessed strength almost on par with that of the 2 heavenly dragons. It took days in order for the gods to stop him, but it also took several days to heal from the wounds inflicted by him. By the time they were ready to interfere, it was already too late. The war was over. The most they could do is help us with healing our people and repairing what was destroyed. They were the ones that negotiated with Sirzex Lucifer. We won't interfere in the devil affairs, that's their holy church's job. Instead we will only act if those so-called affairs affect us directly. Many were afraid that if we let the devils in our country, their biblical faction will slowly influence our people and convert them to Christianity. But fortunately our people were devoted to their ancestors' beliefs and weren't too easy to convert. After all, Shintoism is still the predominating religion in Japan, while there's only 2.3% Christians. The black-haired woman explained. Guess I will have to be careful around devils, Issei muttered under his breath. Hera looked at the clock on the wall and widened her eyes. Would you look at that, it's already this late. This will enough for today. If you have any more questions we will cover them next time. Issei looked confused at the clock. He didn't even notice that how fast time passed. Okay. The teacher and student pair left the temple and were now walking on the streets. The boy's eyes still couldn't help but drift and stare at all of the passing youkai on the streets, many of them acting like humans would. Some were shopping at the market, some were sitting at a bar drinking, some were playing with their children and so on. Stop him! A man screamed, breaking Issei out of his little daydreaming. When he looked at the source he saw a man that seemed to be an ogre running at high speed towards them. He had a very big bag on his shoulder. "Stop the thief!" another man screamed. Issei wasn't too sure what was going on. Should he help? Should he let the authorities take care of it? Then again he wondered if the youkai had any police in first place. Oh my! And it was such a lovely evening. Hira sighed as she stepped forward, putting herself in the ogre's way. She pulled the sleeve of her kimono and revealed a small metallic club tied around her arm. "Outta my way, bitch!" the ogre growled as he was the woman that was blocking his way. A small vein could be saw throbbing in Hira's head, her eyes covered by her bangs. A purplish aura began covering her body. "Bitch!" She asked no one in particular, but everyone who was near her took an involuntary step backward, Issei included. The ogre was just a few steps away from Hira. I said "Outta the..." Whatever he was about to say was violently interrupted by a giant metal club that crashed in his teeth. The next thing he knew, the ogre was sent flying in a nearby stone wall, his silhouette getting printed on the wall. The ogre shortly fell down on the ground, his body stiff and eyes rolled in the back of his head. Issei stared with his eyes gaping. He slowly turned his stare to Hira. The club in the woman's hand has grown in size, almost twice her height. Hira took a handkerchief out of her sleeve and began whipping of the blood of her weapon in her face. "I would advise you to not turn into a thief like that man, Issei-kun, for your sake." The woman smiled sweetly at him, but that sweet smile was scaring the hell out of him. Issei gulped very hard. Perhaps there was some truth in the stories he heard about youkai. While he was busy being terrified, a group of men approached. "We apologize for the inconvenience, Hira-sama," one of the men said. Issei looked at them curiously. They were youkai of different races, but they all had the same clothes. They all wore tight black tops, matching black pants, and over the shoulders they were wearing gray houris. "It's no problem at all." The man was in need for manner lessons. She smiled to the group, her smile sending shivers to the group. "By the way, is Kara-chan doing well?" One of the men, one that seemed to be a tanuki youkai, responded. "The captain is doing well. As always, she is doing her best, though recently it seemed like she has been getting bored." "I see." Hira nodded. "Tell her I said hi." She turned to Issei. "Let's go, Issei-kun," the woman said as she began walking. "Oh okay," he muttered, still in shock from what happened, noting to himself never to anger his Oni teacher. "Who were those people?" he asked, curious. "Those were members of the Kyoto disciplinary squad. Think of them as a police force. Their job is to maintain peace and law in our city. One of my daughters happens to be their captain," the black-haired Oni explained, her features showing pride when talking about her daughter. "You have children, Hira-sensei?" the boy asked, a bit curious. "Two daughters, though they don't really get along. I can't even remember the last time Kara-chan and Mi-chan sat in a room without breaking in a fight or argument." The woman sighed, disappointed. "Maybe they will make up someday," Issei told her, trying to cheer her up. "Perhaps," the woman whispered as she continued to walk. End of chapter 3. Okay, so this is it. If you guys were expecting a time skip after last chapter, you're greatly mistaken. I read a lot of DxD stories in which Issei meets with certain individuals that train him, then they skip to when he is 17-year-old. I plan to take things a bit slower. I want to build more plot and character development in this story. So because of this I will have a prologue arc, if I may call it so, and it will features Issei's growth. Then I will go into the canon storyline. About how many chapters it will have? I think I'd go around 10 chapters. Also I will try not to make Issei up. I think we can all agree that stories in which Issei beats everyone and always saves the day are too common. I want to try and create a character, not a Gary Sue. I mean, it is cool when the hero always beats the bad guys, but he should do it in a way to not make it look like he's broken. As the great Saitama once said, having overwhelming power is boring. Quick question. Should I keep the title of the story or should I change it to High School DxD, Birth of the Crimson Youkai? Now let's talk facts. Ikuro Tomoki. Remember the old man that turned Issei in the boob lover? Well, since he never had a name, I thought, let's give him a name. I wanted a name of a pervert, so I made a combination name of two famous anime perverts. His name is the combination Sakurai Tomoki and Ikuro Mikasugi. Kuno. I made her the same age as Issei. I thought it would be a waste not to do it. Yujutsu. I took the liberty and explained the ideas of Yujutsu since it was never fully explained in the novel or on the wiki. I decided to make character use techniques. I mean, am I the only one who thinks that DxD needs more techniques? Note they will be Japanese named to make things sound cooler, and the translations will be added. About my Japanese? Well, I'll figure something out. Kitsunebi. It means fox fire. Zanka. It means embers. Jackie. It means evil energy. It was used in the original Inuyasha series, so I thought I could use it as the source of why youkai can turn evil if they misuse senjutsu. Serious Mammon. Okay, so I am not going to make just 4 mouths like in the canon. If you wondered why I chose Mammon, is because he is the one that is associated with the sin of greed, so I think it matched pretty well for what he did. Okay, so I'm foreshadowing some rather unexpected characters that will appear in the story. Can anybody guess who those characters will be? There were some small clues in last part of the story. Ryujin. Since he was never mentioned in DxD, I took the liberty of using him. Why I made him so strong? Well, for one, his name means dragon god, lol. I didn't make the training montage with Issei and Sojobo due to lack of ideas. Well, the thing is that I have ideas for crazy training, but they are simply impossible for humans, especially since Issei is only 7, so I will create some training montages when Issei has youkai powers. Should I make Issei make some flashbacks with the training I didn't show this chapter? I make Japanese name attacks, to make them sound more interesting. Instead of saying, bare fist, I would say instead, Kuma Ken. Who do you think would be good pairing for Youkai Issei? In progress. I could use some inspirations and some ideas. So if you have an interesting pairings, write about it in a review. Okay, so have a good day or night wherever you are, and don't forget to review. First, previous ch3 of 3.